Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the launch of Policy and Advocacy. We're very excited to have you here today. It's a great honor to have you with us. The Kenya National Chamber of Commerce, which is a membership-based organization, values our members. And so having you here today is not only significant, but a great honor. So welcome. For those who are just walking in, please feel free to have your breakfast, and we'll start shortly. Again, karibuni sana to the launch of the Policy and Advocacy. We will be running our program, and I will be the MC for the day. And I imagine that as we proceed, not only are we attending a launch, but we're also going to get a lot of information on what's happening in the business environment, as well as what the Chamber is doing to create environments for the business people to be able to trade, to network, to understand the policies, and in general to understand policy and advocacy.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to be here this morning to launch our advocacy policies. This has been the work of over 1 year. As you know, Chamber is responsible for the business community and especially MSMEs. It is said that for every 10 jobs that are created, 7 and above will come from the informal sector. And this is one sector that we need to look after, because this is the sector that if I am cooking today, I can be a Hilton tomorrow. I can be a Bidco tomorrow. I can be a Safaricom tomorrow. For me to be able to make that transition, I need to be assisted. And the assistance is not just about money. It goes beyond. It is about creating an environment where growth can happen. It is about having a conducive place where I am able to work and I am able to pull others to walk along with me. And this is what, ladies and gentlemen, we want to do today. To look at the environment and to say the business community needs A, B, C. Even though today we are only going to do the A and the B. The others, there are many, but it's something that we need to tackle one bit at a time. And those, when tackled, can create a multiplier effect that will not only help the business person, and as you know, when business grows, the multiplier is positive and everything else is able to grow. So my name is Fatma Elmawi. I'm a board member at the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I look after the advocacy committee. I'd like to welcome my colleagues, and allow me to start with our PS for industrialization, Madam Betty Maina. I would also want to welcome my chair, Bwana Kiprono Kitoni. I would also want to welcome the deputy, the vice chair of Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Bwana Mureo, Madam Sitato, a fellow director, our development partners that are here, and all the people that are here. You are here because it is important for you to make sure that SME and that MSME grows. Because when they grow, the economy grows, and of course, the country at large grows. I'd like to welcome also our partner who has walked with us on this journey, and this is SIPE, Center for International Private Enterprise. Bwana Ben Kirago, are you here? He had advised that he had another engagement and he will be joining us later. So we shall proceed with our program. Kindly allow me to call our National Vice Chair, Bwana Mureu, so that Bwana Mureu can in turn welcome Bwana Kitoni. Thank you. Bwana Mureu, please.
It gives me great pleasure to stand in front of you today, and I'm sure you're wondering why I came forward when the Vice Chairman, Mr. Mureu, was invited to ask me to come forward. The reason is because I'm retiring. And as you retire from a role, you know, it's always good to have other people step into that role. Do you agree with me or not? Yeah. But over the last 6 years, I think we have really been working at building a chamber that has inherent capabilities and capacity to do three things, and three things only. One is to be an effective networking platform both locally and globally. Number two is to provide trade facilitation for those in business, and through the issuance of certificates of origin, which has now been fully automated, we've been successful in doing that. And thirdly, and most importantly, which is the reason that brings us here today, to become a champion or advocates for matters of ease of doing business. The other reason that I'm here this morning is that we shall be signing an MOU with the Jam-Free City in the course of this morning. And it is something that I'm really excited about, because what we would really like to see what we can do as business to reduce traffic, which is a major problem. I mean, a few days ago, I landed from Mombasa at about 4:30 in the afternoon. And from Mombasa, from the Jomo Kenyatta Airport to my residence in Lavington, I was reaching my house at 7 p.m. At night. And I think that's really not acceptable, because there is a cost to people sitting in cars and not being able to do anything because you're just stuck in traffic. So we need to benchmark against what happens in the rest of the world, and you know, to really see that we are making an environment or creating an environment that is sustainable and that makes it easier for people to do business. So this morning, actually, I'm really glad that before the end of my tenure, we shall be launching advocacy this morning, and later this month, or early next month, we shall be launching our membership service value proposition, where we are defining very clearly, both at a national level and at a county level, the sort of services that we will be offering. So if you pay your membership to the National Chamber, it should be very clear to you what your expectation will be. But what brings us here today is on matters of advocacy. And I don't think we could have had a better chief guest than Betty Minor, because we all know of the great work that she did in the Kenya Association of Manufacturers that really has helped us also develop a good manufacturing agenda in this country. So I'll ask the National Vice Chairman, or right now he's referred to as a Vice Chamber President, and I'm referred to as the Chamber President, even though for only 3 months, Mr. Mureu, to come and just make the remarks about what we intend to do with respect to advocacy. Thank you very much.
Now, as you've heard briefly from Director Fatma and our National Chairman, we're here this morning to launch our advocacy policy document, and I see Ben Kirago has arrived. Let's welcome Ben. Please come and join us out here. Ben Kirago is from SIPE, the Center for International Private Enterprise, that is actually supporting us in this advocacy. And Ben, we appreciate the support you've given us this far. And I'll tell you something, Ben, as you sit down, like the story of Oliver Twist, we will keep coming back to you for a little bit more, and I hope you will not say no to us. So this morning, we are really here to affirm our commitment to the advocacy role that is a key role that we play as a chamber in terms of ensuring that we have an enabled business atmosphere that allows free enterprise so that people are able to do business as best as they can with little or no hindrances. And so as as a chamber, we found it necessary to not just talk about advocacy, but also to develop a policy that members can actually refer to. And governments, we shall share this with government and government institutions so that they too can have a point of reference. They can be able to refer to a policy document and just know which general direction we are trying to drive the country's business agenda. So to begin with, I think we want to just say that BMOs such as us are intermediaries between public sector and private sector, and just to be able to make sure again we don't have a very rough time whenever people are coming in for business, or whenever we have institutions that are doing business here affected by policies that are developed by the government policies. We are also here as a BMO to actually ensure effective implementation and monitoring of such policies as are developed by the government or the private sector from time to time. There are a number of areas that we as a chamber feel we need to develop a role to play, and one of them is trying to push the government or to speak to the government so that we remove these multiple inter-county licenses. If you look at where I originally come from, Mombasa, if we import, and import in quotes, vegetables from Naivasha, by the time the vegetable goes through all those counties to get to Mombasa, we will not be able to afford this. And this apparently has become a big problem. It is an unspoken problem, but we want to voice it out to all concerned parties like the county governments and the national government, so that we align our thinking. This is one country, and we must now fight so that we do not get taxation along the way, that this vehicle that is carrying my vegetables from Naivasha, by the time it crisscrosses the whole country, then we cannot afford. So that's one of the areas we want to think in. The other strong area that we want to push for government to also consider, and I'm glad government is represented here this morning, is the issue of delayed payments. That has become a thorn in the flesh. And I remember when the American economy was going down, they were asked what is the economic stimulus that the government was going to put into the American private sector to be able to get back on their feet. And there were all sorts of things that were drawn. For us as a country, Madam PS, we are not asking for any economic stimulus. We are only asking for government to pay its debt to the private sector. Let's not have more and more, because the more money that is held out there, the less money that is in circulation, and it is causing, it has a spiral effect on the entire economy, so that you find there is a general lack of resources in the country, not just because there isn't, but because the government, which is the biggest spender, is actually not releasing this money back into circulation. So that's the area we are asking that you consider. Now, as a chamber, we propose the following national policies and standards to promote free movement of goods and services that will help enhance trade and be able to ensure we have a good business atmosphere. I think one of the proposals is that the National Treasury should set up an interministerial task force with representatives from state law office, county governments, and private sector, so that we can actually deal with the issues decisively and come out with concrete issues results and solutions to these problems. They should also adopt and enact, as National Treasury, they should adopt and enact national policy and legislation in accordance with Article 191 of the Constitution of Kenya to provide for uniformity in establishing norms and standards and national policy on cess and infrastructure, maintenance fee, motor vehicle branding, fees, and distribution licenses. Because again, you find, if I have a branded vehicle traveling between here and Mombasa, again, as it travels through the counties, again, it's expected to go through a rigor that is really a nuisance, for lack of a better word, because it just serves to slow our trading. The National Treasury and Ministry of Trade should prepare and adopt and enact a national policy and legislation on national recognition of permits issued by counties. Again, you find this county has issued a permit, but as soon as you cross into another county, it's not valid. I mean, we are dealing with one small country called Kenya, and I think time has come for us to streamline our policies so that we are all aligned in our thinking. We have all our thinking aligned so that we are able to then do business as one great country called Kenya. Vehicle branding also should be defined and clarified. I mean, we have had, again, all manner of decisions, knee-jerk decisions. Today, this governor says this governor says this, and every governor is right in their own ways, but I think we need a national guidance, and we at the chamber here can offer that direction and be able to support where we need to support and challenge where we need to challenge policies that are anti-business. We want pro-business policies that will continue to make sure the country grows as it has been growing. I recognize some other chairmen from the counties, Karibuni, from Uasin Gishu and Trans Nzoia, Karibuni. On the issue of delayed payments, and this is a thorn in the flesh, Madam PS, I think we need to develop a way of ensuring that even government institutions that delay payments are also penalized, because without penalty, we will not be able then to get services and payments on time. And for businessmen and women who are operating on a very shoestring sort of budget, any delay can almost permanently dent and mess their businesses. So we are really pleading, and at this point we are pleading, but we may get to a stage where we'll now be demanding. We are asking the government, please, to try and sort this out, whether at national government level or at county government levels. Therefore, I want to just make a few recommendations that we feel as a BMO of our standing should make to the National Treasury. And we propose that they initiate and review the amendment of the Public Procurement and Disposal Act, Act number 33 of 2015, to provide for prompt payment of full contractual sums upon satisfactory delivery of services. The National Treasury should also initiate and review the amendment on the Public Finance Management Act. The National Treasury should establish a task force to audit and review all pending bills. This is a thorny issue, and I don't know how long the private sector can take this responsibility of pending bills. And my plea to the government is to live within their means. If really you're contracting somebody to commit their resources to build a road from here to Narok or from here to Naivasha, please set aside those resources and make sure the contractor is duly paid when they have completed their contract. It's just good discipline. It's just good way of doing business. And for me, I think that is a no-brainer. It is something that's very basic in terms of good planning. The National Treasury should also, the task force that is established should actually be mandated also to recommend short-term and medium-term measures of reducing pending bills and completion of all payments pending for more than 2 years before 2019. I mean, anybody, I don't know, all of us are businessmen, but you can imagine, Madam PS, when you haven't been paid for 2 years, 3 years, what that means to your business. It can put you down completely. And for me, I plead that we try and make sure the government, being the biggest spender, being the one that is responsible for our business. And for your information, Madam PS, the government is 30% shareholder in my business, because at the end of the day, I pay 30% corporation tax to the government. So they too, government, should be actually interested in what I'm doing. If I go down, their 30% goes down with me. So it's important that the government supports private sector and develops pro-business policies that will continue to take us into the great future. We do have a lot of hope in the government, the policies, and so far so good. We are supportive of the Big Four agenda. We are positioning the private sector to offtake all these opportunities. And in time to come, I hope we'll look back and say, yes, indeed, we have partnered together and it's a win-win situation. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, and I was given a long one, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, it's a long one. Mr. President, Kncci appreciates the support the government has continued to give the private sector, and this we say from the bottom of our heart. And my heart goes out to Madam PS. I think she wears a lot of private sector mentality. She's able to come even at short notice. And Madam, it's not because we are reckless. Sometimes we are lost. When we have invited this one who is not able to come, we have to go back to our best friend. And you are our best friend. And we really appreciate you, Madam PS. Kncci also appreciates the role development partners are playing in building the capacity of business membership organizations. And here I want to cite SIPE, really Ben Kirago, Las, and the SIPE family. We appreciate you because you have stood with us, even at times when the country is on very shaky grounds. I think you have shown commitment and firmness in your commitment to the policies that you stand for. Kncci will also continue to engage the national and county governments in ensuring that they contribute to the micro-enterprise to key subsectors and national economy is maximized. And there we are looking at fast-tracking the MOU we have with the Council of Governors so that we are able to draw more energy and draw more results from an active MOU with the Council of Governors. By adopting the proposed policy briefs measure, it is anticipated that the cost of doing business will further be reduced. Already, Madam PS, and again, my hats off to you and to PS Chris Kiptor and our minister. You notice our ease of doing business is fast coming down. It is because of these pro-business policies that are beginning to bear fruits. But we hope that we can, again, continue to ask for a little bit more. And if the policies on payments are effected, then I can tell you the sky is not the limit. Finally, I want to say suggest that further, by embracing the proposed recommendations above, there will be a significant result in the improved business and investment climate. Already we are doing very well within the continent, but I dare say this, ladies and gentlemen, we must now stop comparing ourselves with the continent. I think we have conquered the continent now, and we must scale our competition to the world now, and look at the best economies like Singapore, Taiwan, Malaysia, who at the turn of independence of this country were at par with this country. Today we can only go to them on our knees and ask them to help us. We have what it takes. We have a vibrant private sector, and I believe we, together with the support of the government and SIPE and other institutions, development partners, we should be able to scale up our positioning of the Kenyan goods and products to international standards. To the exporters and to those who are in the manufacturing sector, mine is to just tell you again, stop benchmarking yourself with your local neighbor here because he's making chairs like this. You must make them almost the same. Let's look at the international standards because our market targeting must now shift from the domestic to the international. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to end up there and say and appreciate once again SIPE and those of us who are here this morning. We don't take you for granted. Being here this morning means you've taken time out of your busy schedules to be with us and to honor this invitation. I really want to appreciate you and thank you very, very much. God bless you.
Madam PS Industrialization, Ms. Betty Maina. And here I want to pause and say, we have worked with Betty Maina for many years as SIPE, and I must admit we do miss her in private sector because she was a critical partner and really worked well when she worked with us at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. But I must admit, like Esther, she has been called to represent this sector in where she is, so we are thankful for that. So PS Industrialization, Ms. Betty Maina, the chair, Kncci, Mr. Kiprono Kitoni, chamber directors and county representatives present, entrepreneurs, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm delighted to be in your company this morning. Thank you very much for making time to join us in this discussion. On how we can create an enabling environment for small business and growing enterprises. SIPE represents Center for International Private Enterprise. We are a US-based organization and affiliated to the US Chamber of Commerce. And essentially we work throughout the world to strengthen democracy through private enterprise, such as working with the chambers and market-oriented reform. Worldwide, we are in about 53 countries, but in Africa, we work like in 15 countries. And we essentially work through business associations such as Kenya Chamber of Commerce, think tanks, universities, and advocacy organizations. Essentially, at SIPE, we believe that for democracy to thrive, we must have a working and a functional economy. And especially, we are particularly passionate about the role of small business because if there's one sector that can get us out of poverty through empowerment, it is the small business sector. Ladies and gentlemen, worldwide, chambers play a critical role in ensuring that businesses are able to overcome trade barriers, both locally and internationally, and often dwarf businesses, slowing economies and consequently adversely inhibiting democracy. Kncci has over the years positioned itself as a reliable partner promoting sustainable growth for small enterprises. In Kenya, there are over 10 million small businesses operating in various sectors. These businesses provide the greatest opportunity, like I had said, to quickly empower citizens through creation of job opportunities. The small enterprises of today are corporate entities of tomorrow. However, to pull them up to that level, we need to institutionalize policies and legislation and promote an enabling environment for business. You know, sometimes I've been doing this for like 10 to 15 years, and sometimes we feel as though we are John the Baptist, like a voice speaking in the wilderness. Because I remember in 2012 when we got the MSC Act passed, and we thought we had arrived in the promised land, but we were just beginning. I am always wondering why we don't give this sector the attention that it deserves. And that's why as SIPE, we're glad to partner with Kenya Chamber to do this. Today, I'm delighted that we are going to launch 2 significant policy recommendations that, when implemented, will contribute greatly to the growth and sustainability of small business. After months of research it is now clear that delayed payments by governments, both county and national, and multiple licenses are some of the main reasons why small businesses are not performing optimally. And as we went through this advocacy process, we started off with a list of 20 issues affecting small businesses. And we went through the process of prioritizing, working with various groups within the chamber, with some counties, so on and so forth. And we ended up with 3 top issues. But today, we'll essentially be focusing on the 2 that have been mentioned. As we discuss these issues today, it is my belief that all stakeholders involved shall each play their role in ensuring that we address these non-tariff barriers identified in this policy brief that are really affecting and to some extent even killing businesses in this sector. And this, in essence, reduces opportunities for business to collect revenue. So there's what's in it for me. If this sector thrives well, we will be able to collect more revenue through taxes. We'll be able to create the much needed employment and thereby reduce poverty. Economic empowerment is the most significant ingredient for enhancing democratic processes in any country. Where there is democracy, peace prevails and economies grow. The discussions we undertake today shall not be about just growing small businesses. This is an opportunity to to broaden the economic space for all Kenyans, which will go a long way in growing our country to greater levels.
We would like to welcome you to 2 plenary sessions whereby 2 of these policies shall be discussed, and we would like to hear from you. How can we move forward as far as delayed payments is concerned? How do you think should we move forward as far as the multiple inter-county licenses should proceed? And then once that has been discussed, we will both come back here again and look at the deliberations, what are the results of the deliberations, and then discuss what is the way forward.
Good, it's really great to be back at the chamber at this time. I'm happy also to note that we now use the term president. I've seen former Commissioner Mr. Kaguthi, and he remembers the days when the term president was a reserved term, and I think it's only with the passage of the new constitution that the term was liberalized. So we find many presidents all over, but it's nice for you to keep the tradition, because around the world the heads of business organizations are called, are referred to as presidents, and they do need, and then I guess that also goes just with the title. I also want to congratulate President Kiprono Kiptonyi, or retiring President Kiprono Kitonyi, for 2 things. One, I think over the last 6 years, the chamber has really been revived and become very, very vibrant. I know when he first took over, we all looked at him and asked him, why was he trying to do this? Because the chamber was associated with exchange of chairs, not exchange of pleasantries. So, but it's those days when we used to really have a lot of fisticuffs and exchange. But it's really been beautiful to see the revival of the chamber, and I just want to ask the team that comes after him to maintain the vibrancy of the institution and make sure that it plays its role in, as an advocacy body, representing the needs of businesses, and both large and small businesses. But you are, the chamber is associated with representation of small businesses, which is a very, very critical component of our economy. The third thing I'd like to say is that I really also want to congratulate you for the work that you're doing today in launching the policy briefs. And these are 2 very important and topical matters, and there are things of obviously of great concern. Multiple licenses and prompt payment are things that have been around us for a while, and I welcome this, because we've made some progress with regard to the matters, but at the same time we also find ourselves back at the place where we need to confront the matter. So these are 2 very, very topical issues. And I'm glad that you're coming in with some research and being able to engage with government so we can all find the solution. I welcome informed engagement by business associations and business groups, and government appreciates that. As Ben mentioned, vibrant business associations are a very core part of a liberal democracy. So strengthening the chamber to be able to give this sort of informed feedback to government is very, very, very critical. And also the way you've organized yourselves following this, we can engage in a very constructive manner. The fourth thing is that the issues of multiple licenses and prompt payment have been around us for a while. When we were writing the current constitution, this constitution 2010, and even before that, part of my own work in the previous, when I was working at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and then when I joined KM, was to be able to, at least to make inputs into the constitutions with regard to public finance management and economic management. So by the time I was at KM, one of the strong things we were very, very keen on, some other colleagues were working on the public finance and the financial management, but I was very keen on the economic management, and especially once we all adopted and looked like we were adopting a devolution, the one thing we were very keen on is ensuring that, or at least trying to ensure that there are features within the Constitution that prevent harassment and very negative repercussions on business in the Constitution. So one of the things I'm really very proud of in the Constitution is Article 1095, right? Article 2095, I must go back to it, that basically said that nobody will be able to, should put in laws and regulations that have the capacity, it's 2095, yeah, to inhibit commercial freedom of commerce within the country. And that is enshrined, freedom of commerce is enshrined in the Constitution. And it's one of those things that should be able to help us handle the matters of multiple licenses. I'm aware that a lot of our county governments have proceeded to put in place licenses that do have this impact. So to start with, I think the first we want to admit is that multiple licenses and requirements that impede freedom of inter-county commerce does not comply with the Constitution. The other thing that we also need to confirm is that even the Treasury has gone further and has requested and has made a demand in the law that all counties, when they are putting in their financial laws, they should check and seek the clearance of the National Treasury to ensure that they do not inhibit this freedom of commerce. I think the challenge that we all face is that many counties are not implementing this, and they are not complying with this constitutional requirement and requirement in the PFM law. So I therefore appreciate what you have come up with and some of the suggestions that you have made. A fifth point, and I sort of come down to commenting on that a bit later. A fifth point is that a couple of years ago, the Kenya Association of Manufacturers and the Commission on Revenue Allocation worked and engaged many lawyers, and we worked on a program, I think it was also supported by the Business Advocacy Fund, to create a framework, first of all, to work with all counties in the design of their finance or their money laws. And there are actually many model money laws available on the CRA website that a lot of our counties can utilize. And part of the motivation of that project on money bills was to create some harmony in inter-county financial laws and to be able to support counties, first of all, as they write their finance and revenue legislation, because then we worked on various revenue laws, but also to try and promote some coherence and harmony between what different counties were charging. I think one of the challenges we face is that we've also had great turnover in counties, especially in the first and second county governments. So the point I make is that there is a legal framework available for our counties, available within the Constitution, and available from the PFM law that should promote inter-county harmonious inter-county commercial activity. So the fact that we still face what we are facing does not mean that we have an absence of legal frameworks. We need to now work towards enforcement. So therefore, I welcome and I agree with you that we do need a working framework between all of us, national governments, county governments, and the private sector to be able to address this matter of multiple licenses. There's a window that is open that gives us an opportunity to address this. One of the focus areas of the president in terms of highlights and focus areas is obviously small business growth and manufacturing sector alongside many others. So I'd like to promise that using our own spaces and opportunities, I'd like to take this matter forward, working with the colleagues in Treasury and in the Council of Governors, because they are seized of this matter, and we are aware that the more businesses are strangled and not facilitated, then none of us will be able to realize the growth that we desire. And so it's definitely not in any of our interests. So I welcome this suggestion, and I agree with you that yes, we should have a very active and firm working group, and I am going to take this up alongside our colleagues in the Ministry of Finance, so that we can see how this can be implemented. When we have engaged in the past, a lot of counties tell us that it is rogue askaris or people that are not complying with the directives. But at the same time, we've also found that there are people who are willing to disobey the law because there are no consequences. So we do need to establish and find the consequences for this this disobedience of the law, but more importantly, just the fact that it is harassing business. So I think I just want to acknowledge it is a problem. It's been around us. There are cures for it, but it requires fidelity to the Constitution and the legal frameworks that have been put in place. On the second comment, on the second issue of prompt payment, it's also a matter that has been around for a long time. So I'm glad that the Chamber is adding its voice to this matter. My colleague in the Department of Trade has recently launched a prompt payment guide, which also has obligations on how promptly businesses should be paid, both private and public. And I think for me, I think it's really, we need to work towards this implementation. When it comes to the question of government has prioritized payments to small businesses. It's something that the President is very, very keen on, and many of us are being monitored with regard to how quickly we are paying ACPO payments, because we appreciate that the space, government procurement is one of the avenues of creating demand and supporting small businesses to grow. But that support is nullified when we delay payments, and it makes it difficult to deliver that promise. So given the fact that a prompt payment guide has been adopted and launched by the Department of Trade, I guess the only promise we can make is that we will work together with our colleagues in trade to ensure that this is delivered. In the case of government, we have had challenges with disbursement, sometimes from the Treasury, and what we call exchequer releases, and challenges when we have when we have budget cuts. But even with that, we've all been instructed to prioritize payments to SMEs. So I actually ask that we engage also with with some facts and analysis, and with the specific ministries that haven't that are not respecting and paying promptly. Yet we know that, and in the event that we know that they have resources. So I just want to say that the work supporting SMEs, we recognize the role that SMEs play in this economy, and government has a specific spot and a specific obligation to support SMEs by addressing the concerns and the issues that they raise. So these issues of multiple licenses that affect inter-county commerce and this prompt payment are very much on our agenda, and I therefore want to just say let us invite the chamber to the working committees that will be that will be established. I mean, I guess we probably I probably say in our own instance, I'll actually work with my colleague PSS to establish and to at least or strengthen the working forums for ensuring we address these issues, and it will be important that the chamber is at the table. So, with that, I congratulate you on bringing this work forward, and we receive it and look forward to studying and working together to answer the questions that you have raised, because I do not want to pretend that there are easy answers. It is a question of working together to create the frameworks that will actually deliver the promise, because the legal framework is there, the guidelines are there. It is for all of us, both in government and in the private sector, to also deliver. This challenge on multiple licenses and prompt payment also applies to the private sector. Government is a large consumer of goods and services, I know, so we take our responsibility. But it must also be a responsibility and a rule that is enforced between yourselves, so that these stories of saying that the check is in the mail, we did not get the invoice, and all the delaying tricks cannot only just apply to government. It must also, you must challenge yourselves in the private sector to ensure that there is prompt payment along the entire chain. I thank you very much.
Madam PS, it's always a pleasure to have you around, and it's always a pleasure because she's always positive and has promised to be able to help us on this journey. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a journey of over 8 months, whereby, as was said by Bwana Kiragu, we had over 20 issues and we whittled them down to 10, and then from 10 we went to 5, and then from 5 we went to 3. Why? Because we actually looked at what are the issues that the SME and the SME, wherever they are, whether they're in Baringo, they're in Lamu, they're in Turkana, whether they're in Nairobi, what are the issues that they have? And then thereafter, of course, we went into research to confirm, because sometimes you may think of something which may not actually be what is happening. So we needed to either negate or confirm what our thoughts were. And later, Bwana Kiragu Wachira will come and tell us what we thought were the challenges are actually the challenges.
I think, Betty, I was just going to say that your remarks are very reassuring today. We have had, you've dealt with the topic of inter-county trade very comprehensively, like you would. I mean, you have a lot of knowledge and experience in that. But I think really, if we were to all be seriously honest with ourselves, I mean, Kenya is the only country on the planet that shifts 1/3 of its GDP over the phone every day. The M-Pesa platform and very many other innovations actually make Kenya considered one of the most innovative countries in the continent of Africa. But when you will agree that the way that CES is administered by the county governments leaves a lot to be desired. Every time I travel in the rural areas and you see the guy standing with a rope across the road, and we are still the same country that moves 1/3 of our GDP, you wonder where is the disconnect. So I think that really there is a big opportunity for government and for private sector to combine forces to really make it possible that we can have trade flowing much more seamlessly. And thank you again for your comments on delayed payments. I would also want to say that we did get the apology from the Cabinet Secretary, Henry Rotich, who was to have been here with us today, but was unable to because of a cabinet meeting that was called by His Excellency the President. But we do have the assurance by the National Treasury that they are doing everything possible to look at the issue of delayed payments. And again, to say that delayed payments has occasioned great suffering in our people. Families have been broken. Businesses have collapsed. People are unable to meet their daily obligations of food and afford themselves a dignified livelihood. You know, it's really caused immense and incredible suffering in Kenya. So something must be done on this extremely urgently. And on the issue of delayed payments, also we are contending with one other problem. You see, the Central Bank of Kenya came up with guidelines that if you are in default of a bank debt for 3 months, then the bank must make a full provision for it. So we are dealing with a tightening credit regime where people fall afoul on month 4. If you don't pay your credit cards on the 4th month, you do find that you'll be listed by the Credit Reference Bureau, after which your bank will no longer consider you credit worthy, so you fall off the people who are considered to be credit worthy, and you cannot thereafter go ahead and build a business. Given that, and I do also acknowledge your comment that the private sector is guilty as well, because what has happened is national governments don't pay, county governments don't pay, then the knock-on effect is large corporates don't pay, small corporates fail to pay. Surprisingly, even non-governmental organizations have got into the habit. So it's become almost like a national tabia mbaya hapa. People just don't want to pay. I mean, because they can refuse to pay. Now, Madam PS, one of the things that we would probably want considered into the future is an amnesty of sorts by people who have fallen afoul of their credit worthiness, not because that was their intention, but because they were not paid. I think it's something that must be considered, because many people today cannot go to anybody's bank or anybody's microfinance institution and borrow any money. They are now reduced to having to borrow from Shylocks, who you know what those guys do. Yeah? It's not the best way to borrow. But I think there should be a consideration that once the public debt has been significantly reduced, then we should also have an amnesty for those who became uncreditworthy simply because they didn't get paid. So, Madam, thank you so much for being here with us. I believe we have a breakout session after this, after the health break. But I'd like to call the PS and the National Vice Chairman and Mr. Kiragu, so we can, the National Chairman, Chamber Vice President, and to come so we can launch the policy brief that is with us, in front of us.
It took me 2 hours today to get here. And I'm sure if I were to ask, by a show of hands, who has had to sit in traffic for more than an hour? Isn't it? How much do you think we lose as a country? Is it to the tune of millions or billions? We lose a lot. We lose man-hour. We get pollution. We have to import more fuel, isn't it? And fuel is expensive. So one of the things that Kncci is doing, we are working with an organization called Jam-Free Society so that we can look at ways, how do we decongest Nairobi? How do we make transport easier? It's frustrating to spend 2 or 3 hours. That's the best time that your mind is thinking. And by the time you get to the office, you need another half an hour just to come down for you to be able to work. We do have an MOU with Jam-Free City. This MOU we would like to sign this morning. I would like to invite my chamber president, I got it right this time, my chamber president and Bwana Douglas Muchoki to sign this MOU so that we can, again, as a policy issue, what do we need to do in order to decongest Nairobi and look at other cities as well. Remember, KNCCI works at making business environment better. Oh, thank you. You mean you didn't hear me? And I was saying such nice things? Okay. Now, let me just recap. One of the things that KNCCI is doing is to work with Jam-Free City so that we can look at ways of decongesting Nairobi to start with, and then look at other cities, because we lose a lot of money to the tune of billions because people can sit in traffic for 2 or 3 hours in any given day, and that could be one way. So if you lose 2 hours in the morning and you lose another 2 hours in the evening, that is 4 hours out of your 24, you only have 20 hours left. I would like to call upon my chamber president and the director from Jam-Free City, Bwana Douglas, so that they could sign an MOU, and again, chamber to work with them in order to make sure that we make the business environment better and we make the business environment easier so that businesses can grow.
Intention is to create some facility that is going to address all the factors that brings about congestion in the city. We have done a research for a period of time and come up with a concept paper that is going to improve on our city and transform the city to a 24-hour economy. We are also intending to create tens of thousands of jobs as we do the construction or do the transformation project, which we hope and we intend to incorporate all the stakeholders, all the entire public to participate in this project. It is still at initial stages, but soon we are going to invite you again to a seminar that is going now to address all the issues. So thank you very much, and welcome.
We also have colleagues from different partners, from different organs of the government. We will also ask them, and they will tell us if that particular issue is being handled or if that particular issue is actually in the pipeline. They will also give their feedback, and then thereafter we will go to the second policy brief. Bwana Washira, karibu.
Thank you so much, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your indulgence. When my system did not meet the expected, just medium-term expected outcome, but I'm happy that now we are happier because we have had a cup of tea, juice, and the rest, and I can see you from your faces that you're excited to be around. Just briefly, my professional background is law, specialized in international trade, legislative development, and international development. And I'm glad this morning to come and facilitate the discussion, the discourse around the two policy briefs, one on inter-county taxation and the other one on government supply. And as it has been mentioned earlier, we've worked on the other one on access to credit, which will be shared after. And I'm privileged today because there are two people I've met today. One I've not met in a long time. One is Mr. Kagudi here, who actually is my mentor in public policy. From about 2005 is when we started working with him. And he helped me to clarify on how government works. When you are mentored by a former provincial commissioner, then you can know how that you know how government works. And the other one I've just met today is my friend, my high school house captain. And so it was very exciting to meet him today, and I'm happy. So what I'll do is that I'll highlight briefly the background on where we're coming from in terms of the process. Then I'll run briefly through the brief. The presentation, as you're aware, PowerPoint is just to summarize the issues, but the whole content and most of the issues are covered in the brief. And then we'll have a time for discussion. As you're aware, policy briefs are not the sessional papers. They're not the policy documents or what we call sessional papers. They are documents to generate information, conversation, and dialogue with policymakers and the key stakeholders. And so that is the bottom line that we are working with. That we want to present documentation that can help us have a conversation on the issues that we're dealing with. And then, in terms of background, what I did is, and I was engaged by the chambers with the support of SIDE, that we engage in terms of research, both the policies that are existing, engaging with stakeholders, the key players, and some of them are here, who are in the industry, and they're the ones who feel the pinch of the issues that we're discussing. And therefore, what we are presenting here is a mix of both policy research and also reflections and experience from the industry players. So the first policy brief, you're going to look at inter-county taxation and how that affects the medium and small enterprises. But specifically, and I'll highlight that, we're going to look at the three major areas. So for this policy brief, what you're looking at is facilitating dialogue, both private and public dialogue, in a way that can help eliminate restrictive trade practices in regard to inter-county trade and movement of goods and services across the counties. And we have identified three major areas of focus in this policy brief. One is cess. As you're aware, if you come from the village, there's some money. And if you're dairy farmers or coffee farmers or tea farmers, there's some little money we used to pay called cess. So that has never stopped. It was transmitted from the local authorities to the county governments. So that's the first one we want to look at, and how cess is being levied and how it affects inter-county trade movement. But some counties, like Kiambu County, has renamed cess because there's a lot of litigation around cess and how it's collected and how it's levied. And they've renamed theirs to infrastructure maintenance fees. So you can see it's the same kind of a fee and charge with different names. Then we're going to look at motor vehicle branding licenses and permits. And the last one is distribution. So those three have been identified as the core areas of both the licensing, requirement for permits, and requirement in terms of fees and charges that affect the cross-border movements of goods and services across the counties. And the desire for the private sector is to engage the policy space in regard to how best can we approach these taxes of licenses and fees in a way that can promote trade and business. Briefly, I will not go into the whole theoretical framework around cess, but just briefly, cess is levied on two major areas, agricultural products and extractives. And agricultural products, we are looking at products like maize and cabbages for commercial purposes. And even fish is there also. But for extractives, you're looking at stone and sand and all the materials that are usually extracted. So those are the two major areas that we are looking at in terms of cess. Of course, timber, which is a major product that is levied, cess is levied on, falls under agricultural products in a broader, because forestry falls in a broader perspective under agriculture. Now, just an example, we must recognize that cess forms part of revenue for governments and county governments. So we are starting from the point that the counties levy cess as part of their revenue generation. And we have highlighted just a few counties, about 4 counties, and indicated what is the percentage of cess contribution to their revenue. So for Embu, for example, it's 7%, and Nakuru is 1.2%, Kiambu 3.9%, Kncci is 2.7%. So that shows you that counties do levy cess for purposes of collecting their revenue. And as you know, they have about 14 functions. 13 are substantive county public services. 14th function is about engaging the community in public participation. So they must finance their services and the functions that they are assigned by the Constitution. So cess is measured, the unit of measurement, which we'll briefly look at when we are considering some of the gaps and challenges. The unit of measurement for cess is in 3 categories. 1 could be weight of the product that you're dealing with. 2, the package of the container, maybe per sack. And 3 is the capacity, the load capacity of the motor vehicle. So different counties apply different units of measurement. They can apply weight of the product itself, the packages, or the carrying capacity of the motor vehicle. And that is not uniform in the various counties. So different counties will apply different frameworks. And then it's collected mainly from the county government's roads or along the national government roads, or what you'd call the national trunk roads. And we're going to highlight what is the importance for us highlighting that. Now, in terms of the fees, and we just thought of just highlighting what is the quantum of amount of money that counties levy. For example, Embu will collect their fees like between 100 to 1,200 per ton. But for Nakuru, it's 1% of gross turnover. So you can see the variance in terms of how they are collecting. And therefore, if you're moving from one county to the other, one county will pay per ton, and the other county is per turnover. Kiambu will deal per trip, and the same case with and Kncci will deal per trip or per container. So you can see that if you're moving your goods across these counties, you face different regimes in terms of using the unit of measurement. So that's about cess. So if you go to the motor vehicle branding, the Constitution assigns the function of outdoor advertising to the counties. And outdoor advertising would mean branding, whether it's billboards, signages like for your offices, but also in terms of the motor vehicles. So what the framework is, you find that across the counties, the levy for branding your motor vehicle is between 5,000 to 8,500 per year per motor vehicle. Now, most of the branding obviously affects the private sector, because the branding is mainly for the corporate colors, your green, your blue color, your names. If you're doing a movement like of goods or transportation, you're trying to advertise your products on your motor vehicle. So that is what we mean by branding. Not your graffiti, sometimes that you can put, just small graffiti that you believe in Manchester or Arsenal and all that. That will not necessarily fit within motor vehicle branding. And what happens is that counties levy fees for motor vehicle branding for vehicles whose commercial establishment is located within a county, but also on vehicles that drive into or through the county. And you find, and some of the stakeholders we engaged, like this one who does transportation of goods, and many times their vehicles have been stopped in some counties, and they were passing through that county to another county, and they asked, can you show us the fee, the license that you paid for in terms of branding of your motor vehicle, just because you drove into our county or through our county. So, and that's the difference. In this brief, we are not discussing the merits and demerits of why should you tax someone when they are branding their motor vehicle. So that's a different frame of thinking. But here we are looking at why you should apply double taxation when a vehicle is branded and paid for that branding fee in one county, and it's moving maybe to supply goods to another county or transporting the goods through that particular county. Now again, we put a table there of how much it costs through a sample, how much it costs to charge and levy branding fees. For Embu, it's between 4,000 to 10,000 shillings per motor vehicle. For Nakuru, it's about 6,000, 10,000, Kiambu, 5,000 per vehicle, and then Kncci. Of course, there you can already see which is the most expensive county. Kiambu looks the cheapest in terms of an average 5,000. Kncci would have the highest, mostly for the long and large trucks. So that is just an indicator of how much a county would pay for, would charge. Then that tells you then, if you're moving your goods across the counties, then this is the money you'd pay in each of the counties for moving your branded vehicle, especially if you're in distribution services. The last one, in terms of the taxes, we're looking at distribution licenses. As you know, distribution services is one of the classified commercial activities globally. And so here we're looking at distribution in two aspects. There's distribution of services when your commercial establishment is located within a county. That one you have to take a license. But then here we're also looking at levying licenses for distributing your goods. You're based in County A, like Nairobi County. But if you move your goods to Kiambu and to Embu and to Nakuru, then you have to pay fees for distribution of those goods and services in each of those counties. So that's what we are looking at here in this manner. And again, the fees for distribution, Embu is between 15,000 and 30,000. Nakuru, the highest is about 135,000. When I look at it, because we were looking at the county Public Finance Act. So this is not cooked data. Although, of course, you know, sometimes computers can cook some things, or may be presumed to cook. But this is data we picked from the statistics in the counties. Kiambu is between 2,000 and 5,000. Then Kncci is the highest, is 30,000. So you can already see that out of this bracket, Nakuru then is the highest in terms of taxation for movements of goods and services, goods and of course distribution services. So then that is the basic description of the three taxes that we are actually dealing with. Now let's look generally what are the key challenges facing the sector that we're dealing with. The first one, we are talking about multiple taxation because there is a lack of universal recognition of licenses. Universal recognition means that if I have a license to distribute, or I have paid fees in a county, and those fees are dealing with cess, that I can transport those goods across the country and not pay any other cess, except if now you're taking those goods into the last point of call, like into the market. So that's the first challenge, that those permits are not recognized across board. Two, poor collection administration, and that has already been indicated by the president. Erection of barriers, and the stakeholders have indicated that is a major challenge, that the barriers are across board. But the other challenge around it is collection on the national trunk roads. And I wonder, if I'm driving to Nakuru, of course I'll pass through from Nairobi, I'll go through Kiambu, I'll go through Nakuru County, and if I'm going further, I'll go through several other counties. So why should I pay any money for just using a national government road, just passing through your county? And that becomes a challenge, because then on what basis would you be levying taxes on a national government road? And the last one is application of different units of measurement. Like I've said, you're a trader and you're supplying to potatoes. If you go through these three different counties that apply 3 different units of measurement, it's even confusing for your tax, for your accounting and your system. One is doing percentage of turnover, another one is per sack, another one is per ton, another one is per the size of the motor vehicle. So that becomes a confusion for the private sector players. For branding of motor vehicles, the same thing. Multiple taxation, especially levying charges on motor vehicles that are just temporarily carrying out commercial activities in your county. You know, like they just brought goods to your county just because they were branded. They have to pay for that. Then the other one is imposing branding licenses. You know, for operators whose commercial establishment is not within the county. And then the last one is impounding, the way of enforcement. Like the stakeholders we engaged, they indicated that their vehicles have always been impounded in many counties, except some few counties which they say they don't actually have a challenge with the branding of motor vehicles, multiple taxation, so long as you show them that you've paid for your vehicle in your county of origin. For distribution, the first challenge is actually same thing. You're distributing your goods across the counties, and you're not even going to sell those goods to the consumers. You're actually supplying those goods to business consumers, like business to business transactions. So then the question is, why should you be paying for that? And then the last one is just imposing of that the license requirements when you're moving across the counties. So that becomes a challenge when you're locating within that particular county, supplying that county, and also moving across the counties. What is the impact of this taxation on the stakeholders or the sector? One is the increase in the cost of distributing goods and services. And we give the example, if you're distributing goods in a branded motor vehicle, then you pay double, because you have to pay for distribution licenses, and you have to pay for the branding of that particular motor vehicle. And now if the goods you're dealing with are categorized as agricultural or extractives, then you have to pay cess. So you're talking about three different kind of taxes, all going to the counties. So the second one is increased cost of doing business for both manufacturers, distributors. As you know very well, distribution costs form a very good part of the cost of transactions or cost of economic activities for any company. Then of course, the potential reduction in sector attractiveness because of high fees that are levied in the sector. Then of course, manufacturers are opting not to supply goods directly. This is the current scenario, where now manufacturers are preferring the wholesalers, for example, to come for the goods from their outlets, because then that way they don't have to pay for any fees. Because if I bring the goods to you, then I have to pay. So they just ask the wholesalers and distributors in their counties, just come and pick your goods. That has reoriented the normal way of doing a business. Then of course the other one is the restriction of movement of goods and services, which by and large the country provides that we are a common market, and therefore you should not be restricting that. What are the policy gaps around that? So what we have done is to describe what is the current situation, what are the challenges that we are facing. Then we must ask ourselves, what are the policy gaps? Because if you're talking about policy interventions, then we must say, despite those challenges, what are the policy gaps that could be contributing or could be attributed to that challenge? So the first one is lack of national uniform policy on standard on the unit of measurement. We don't have a national standard on what is the unit of measurement for potatoes. And you know the politics of Kinangop and Nairobi. You know, the sack is like 2 sacks. And Bonakagudu would feel that because that's part of his home. And so we need, that's the major gap. So the counties have no obligation to take one unit of measurement. So the second one is lack of policy in regard to promoting free movement of goods and services across board. So lack of policy in terms of if you're distributing goods across the counties, you require a national policy to indicate this is the standard that actually would be followed. The other one is lack of policy on mutual recognition of county fees and county licenses. And that universal recognition is the mother of everything. Because if I have a license in Nairobi, that license should apply across board. Then of course the other one is lack of policy regulating the powers of the counties to collect and impose taxes, especially on national government roads and all that. So then briefly, what is the policy recommendation? One is for the National Treasury to prepare, of course in collaboration with other stakeholders, to prepare a national policy to implement Article 191, which provides for the circumstance under which the national government, the national policy would prevail over a county policy. When you talk about national norms, national standard, national policy to protect a common market, free movement of goods, services, capital, and labor, and environment, security, and all that. So that's part of what we are proposing, so that we have a common market in reality and not just within the constitution. And two, the counties to automate their tax collection as an obligation, not necessarily as a preference. That had already been indicated. And three, the National Treasury in collaboration with the Ministry of Trade to prepare policy for adoption in regard to national recognition of county licenses. So that requires a national law on licenses, so that then a license issued in a county is applicable to other licenses. There are some counties that have entered into mutual agreement just between those two counties. But a trader who is transporting goods across the country, or across maybe 8 counties, 7 counties, then that becomes a necessity. And the last one is the national norm on the units of measurement, a national standard. If it's for agricultural products, we have one uniform way of measuring that. And that way then it saves the stakeholders. Then there's a general policy which had already been highlighted by the Deputy President. The recommendation for formation of an interministerial task force to look at the taxation powers, but look at the proposal that we're looking at, so that the Treasury, Trade, and Industrialization, they look at the framework that will implement the recommendations that we have made. The last one, we've looked at the best practice. Of course, you know that Kenya is now a medium sized income country. So we are not the least developed country, although there are different ways of classifying. But we must borrow certain best practices from other countries. And the reason for best practice is to identify, are there other countries that have something that we can borrow from? Of course, we picked regulation of interstate commerce or trade in the United States of America. And we picked certain things that we feel that would be quite good for the country. One is that within US, of course, it's a federal state. But states have powers to enact the laws, just like the counties here, so long as those laws don't contradict the federal laws. So, but what we realize the states do not regulate, including tax, interstate commerce, which of course refers to the purchase, sale, or exchange of commodities across the states. So that the states will not be regulating that. The other one, only businesses established or located with and doing business in a state are subject to that state taxation, not the ones that are dealing with interstate commerce. And how they define in their framework is that interstate commerce does not constitute doing business in a respective state, a state other than the state where you're located. And that's part of what we're looking at in terms of the policy recommendation. Isolated transactions by a business in another state or other than the state of location does not constitute doing business. In Kenya, isolated transactions, if I go, I'm Kevian, for example, taking the juice across 5 counties, those are occasion, you're just dropping. And they most like supply maybe once in 2 months, if large quantities. But then in US, that will not necessarily fit within that particular category. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, what we were just saying, that multiple taxation is increasing cost of doing business and reducing the growth of the industry and the potential for employment. And by adopting the measure that we are proposing, then you would actually improve business climate. And what you're saying is that from here, the recommendation we're making is for us now to carry the discussion further on what are the appropriate policy measures that we can take. That is a short story that I had around it. So what we can do is that we can now have conversations briefly around comments, questions, especially how we can carry forward the discussion and implementation of the recommendations that we have. I think that would be quite helpful.
This conversation has come at the right time. The mandate of the Commission basically is to enhance on-source revenue in the counties. And we've been working with counties. I think Betty Maina was here in the morning saying that with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, between 2013 and 2017, we were engaged in trying to ensure that counties are able to understand the space of on-source revenue, on-source revenue streams and how to enact their laws and make sure that there's a bit of order in that sector. But I want to start by saying that already there's a policy in place that was passed by Cabinet last year, and with it is accompanied a bill that is supposed to be is in Parliament and is being discussed even with the Council of Governors to help them understand that the space of taxation is actually a national government's function when it comes to policy. That cannot be taken away from national government. In fact, the Constitution in 2095 clearly says that whatever revenue sources or streams that you are going to pass as a county should not prejudice the economy or stop the mobility of goods and products. So it's very important that as a national government that policies are set out and enforced to ensure standards and norms. So I think that with time I can share with you the policy and the process bill so that you can look at it and even engage first internally as the chamber, and then you can now bring in the members, because I think it's important for them to understand a couple of things that have been introduced or recommended in that policy. But very clearly, I'll just quickly give you a brief history background. Early in 2013, this chairman, Cheseren, received various complaints from very many businesses about the multiple and duplication of taxes. And in fact, he was a victim because he has a flower farm in Naivasha. And he was really struggling because every time the flowers were being stopped and counties were checking because they were supposed to be brought to the airport and they're perishable goods. So it was really bothering him. So sometime at the end of 2013, we approached the Kenya Association came to us and said, look, our businesses are hurting, this cannot continue. What is happening is we are now having unbranded trucks, we just paint them white, or we pass on the cost of the fees to the customers. And so it meant that the products became expensive because they were not willing to take that cost. And in fact, one of your colleagues, I think he's called Reward, was part of that process when we were trying to see how we can, streamline this sector. But what happened was, especially for CES, people don't understand. CES was very interesting. You know, after independence, Kenya was an export country, and there were perishable products: tea, coffee, livestock. So cess was introduced so that that product can fetch the highest market value. Since it's perishable, the roads have to be paved, especially from where they are being collected, the tea or the coffee. So they had to make sure that the coffee farmers, so that the money doesn't come from national government, it was taking so long. The local authority was levying a cess to ensure that the transportation of that product from where it has been, from the source to the market, can fetch the highest product in terms of costing. And so cess was introduced for that particular reason. However, came devolution, people now misinterpreted cess, and now they were charging it in so many other things, sand, stone, even almost oxygen. You know, as long as you're in my county and you're breathing my oxygen, you're going to pay cess. So that policy has completely brought out the issues that were being raised regarding those revenue streams. Business permit. In that policy, it has been recommended that one single business permit should be charged, and it should be charged at the place where your company has been registered. And this is because many businesses were taking advantage also. Let me not only say that the county governments are at fault, but also businesses were taking advantage because they could register one company here, another company there, so they were trying to evade. They say, oh, I'm in this county, I'm in the other county. So we say a single business permit is required. Why? Because with the devolution, many permits and fees were being charged for health, for garbage. So we said we can't go back to where we were in the 80s. We have to go back to the single business. And when we realized that, because there were now different types of businesses are coming up, like one big mall, there's a supermarket, in the supermarket there's a pharmacy, in the supermarket there's a laundry. So we said, let's call it a single trade license, so that each trader pays it based on the square feet, or there has to be some unit of measure. And then we also, in that policy, county governments were involved. I think the mistake we made is that we did not involve the private sector and the businesses. So they are probably clueless about it. And once it was passed last year, it has a period of 10 years to be enforced. But at the back of that policy is a matrix that requires the involvement of business and private sector. And so I think what the conversation from here should be, how can you get hold of the policy? How can you be able to incorporate those measures that have been recommended? And which areas do you think private sector and county governments need to meet? But very briefly, I just tell you about the bill. As I said, the bill recognizes Article 209, that there is the need for national government to occupy this space and set standards and norms. So it is a process bill. It does not stop the counties from raising their own revenue. All we are saying is that there has to be a clearing house. Especially in instances where you're saying, what are you going to use to weigh agricultural products? Is it the tonnage? Is it the weight of the vehicle? There has to be some standards and norms. So the process bill is a clearing house. It provides all the counties, because you cannot tell one governor that because I'm a governor X, my taxation bills are superseding your taxation bills, because they're equal, but there has to be a clearing house. And Treasury, who is the custodian of fiscal principles, the fiscal space. National Treasury is for both national government and county government. So it is not a national government role, it's a national Treasury role as custodian of the fiscal policy to ensure some order and some order and some standards in that space. So this bill is a process bill. It also understands Article 191, which provides that where there is a requirement of national standards and norms to be set, then the national government passes one legislation for all the 47 counties. And also, it agrees with Article 6.2 that says that there has to be mutual cooperation and coordination between the two levels of government. And that was done when we called the interagency. For 1 year, we sat with the national government and the county government, and we have recommendations that were both accepted by national government and county government. So I think that would shed some light in this space. Thank you.
We've taken note of that, and we'll take your contact, because this is a journey that needs a lot of friends to walk with. It is also said that Kenya does not lack laws. We have too many laws, isn't it? What is the issue? Implementation. That is where the challenge is. We'll encourage more feedback. How do we move forward this conversation? If you could kindly comment before we request our panelists
to give us responses. I believe your hand was up.
Do not get desperate. This journey, I can see it backwards, ever since there was a cabinet subcommittee. If you members, the older members can remember somebody, the late Cyrus Ita, when we were trying to consolidate the proliferation of licensing, the authorities and everything which were hidden in business. Remember it? And we were trying to get one center where government bureaucrats, instead of exercising their authority on the SMEs. So it's a journey that is on. Keep it up. Okay. Just keep it up. Keep raising those areas of business. The biggest, I think, challenge the commission, the chamber, and personally need to highlight is the enforcement of laws and standards. And you have a lean subcommittee, a committee of the chamber, where you keep on flagging that. But that is our main areas weakness as a country: enforcement of laws and standards, so that we keep on wasting so much of our resources across. And when corruption comes in, and as a bureaucrat myself, a retired bureaucrat, retired in 1999, as a retired bureaucrat, I can tell you, what happens is that every government officer, they like filling and occupying their space. And therefore they throw their weight on you because they don't have an inkling on the consequences they are causing. Remember what the president said there? That delaying the payments, it is destroying families, businesses. That bureaucrat does not have that. So, but the minute you set that, and then that, you take advantage of an infrastructure created by government now, which I'm afraid government is a very poor marketer. That is Executive Order number 3 of 2014 of the President, Presidential Executive Order on the dispatch of government in the field, the counties, coordination of national government functions in the field. If you pick that, and you pick another process called the organization on how on the operations of government by the Public Service Commission, is a document which is very clear and it has the laws which are there. And finally, the Executive Order number 1 of 2019, the recent one. Supposing you said this, yes, that all those things that are bothering you, you write a petition, send it to the committee chaired by Honorable Matiang'i, and you tell them, if you don't have law, create a gazette notice to give yourself law, and clear all those bottlenecks. The ones which are region specific, like my county here, Central. I'm dealing now, we have had to stop. A farmer in All Cloud has 21 acres of timber, and they want to sell it to Bidco, Thika. The proliferation of licenses and authorities, levies, we had to tell them, stop it. We first of all get back, we see whether we can convert all that timber to charcoal, and then we sell it, so that because you get only one license for charcoal. So you now get, because they are regional specific, the committee chaired by the regional commissioner. Is it possible, and you widen it from where the president is, include the county governments, so that that which is approved by that committee is given an okay and acceptance. The ones which are county specific and they're interim, similarly, you use that government executive orders and regulations where they are putting government into a good system where it's a consultative. You told me to just stand, and I congratulate all of you for what you are doing. I was to be in a BBI of my county, but I said no, this one here I want to listen, because now from the time I retired, I need to come a little bit to the private sector, I get inducted. I'm getting inducted.
That is most useful. From what we have heard, we can now actually see the road and how do we need to tackle this journey. There are things that are already there and departments that we need to get in touch with in order to make sure that implementation actually happens. I'd love to now welcome feedback from this side.
This is an active discussion we will had amongst ourselves, the government, and it's actually real, and it affects business community deeply, and we really thank chambers for what they're doing. It's a discussion, active discussion in the right direction. We've had issues on this, at the same time, issues of late payment. And when we were discussing this with Kiragu, I really appreciate that what we discussed is actually captured. And listening from representative from CRA, it's good that the government has also recognized this one and is working on the normalization of these licenses. We really appreciate it. The only thing we request is we also want to familiarize ourselves with what exactly is contained in this, so that we get to know what has been captured, what's not captured. We are the people that we feel the itch. We represent a very important group that feel the itch, and maybe one or two things could be added on what already has been done. Maybe I will comment more when it comes to prompt payment, since we've been working on 1, 2, 3 things on the same area. Thank you so much.
Sheila has said a bit of what the position of the Commission is, but I would like to add 1 or 2 things. Starting from the fact that there is a policy which has gone through a lot of stages and it's out there. The people who are taxed are the business community, and those are the people that we represent. As a business community, we want to be either on the table discussing those issues, or we will be part of the menu and we will be eaten alive, possibly. In that case then, what do we need? One action point that I would like to carry from this particular meeting is, let us find a way of getting into the implementation interagency team which is implementing this policy. Then we will carry this policy brief and see whether there are things which are overlapping and say, thank you very much if you have done this. If there are others which have been left out, then we ask, how can we carry everybody along? Because we are the businesses who are being taxed, and we are the ones who are suffering, we are the ones who are building this country. Thank you very much.
May I invite? Thank you very much. May I invite input, 2 more, before we call our panelists. Maybe they could also respond. Okay, I was trying to do cross-running. Let's see how I can manage this.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Rosemary. I'm in agri-business export. And like what my friend has said there about, we are the most taxed people, business communities. And when we are the business people in this country, we are the people growing the economy. And most of the times, we are taxed so much until you feel like giving up. If the government doesn't place one arm where we can have services, especially in implementing taxation and policies to govern our businesses, where we can get one license and we are able to do inter-county trade, which will build the economy. It will empower even the mashinani mama mboga economically and socially. And it is my request to the government, if they would form an organization where we can be taxed or where we can pay levies for our businesses, even if they say 10,000, 20,000, and you pay for once, and you are able to do your business inter-county trade. It will really help our people create wealth, our government to create, to empower people economically, and also globally. Recently, I tendered somewhere and I got the tender. It was a small tender, I'm a small SME. And when I got that tender, I needed about just 300,000 to supply the goods. I went to the banks, I couldn't get the credit. Luckily, my good mama chamas, they gave me the 300,000. I was able to deliver the goods. And to your information, when this tender was paid by a prominent private company, one of the parastatal stroke private, I was paid 450,000 total, and the taxation was about 62,000. I was making only 88,000 out of that tender. Can you see how much money I used to do the business? What can be done to help even women be able to do businesses, create wealth, and also grow the economy of our country? My humble request again, the government should come up, like what Madam has said, with one-stop shop where we can pay for all these licenses and it being one license, so that we can be able to do inter-trade in the counties, and that is the only way Kenya will grow economically to the highest level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Muleli from Kipra. First of all, thank you very much for the good work which has gone into this policy. It is starting a very good narrative, which I hope it will continue. Some of the things I could have said have been said, so I won't repeat myself. I think one of the things you could consider is maybe best practices or lessons from countries with a similar framework of government, that is decentralization. What they have done about the issues of multiple taxes, and what we can borrow or what we can learn from them. Then the other issue is, you could also consider, there have been various efforts from the various agencies, to harmonize these taxes or to bring a gentleman's agreement. I'm having in mind like IBEC, the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Committee, and also the summit, which brings all the players like county governments and the ministries or the MDS which are involved. And they try to strike a balance or something like that. You can find out the extent to which those interagency committees have succeeded and where there are gaps and what can be done about them. In so recommending, it will also improve about this issue of multiple taxes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Before I call upon the lady to give her feedback, I'll just give it to my colleague, Chow, so that to call the panelists who will tell us what is the government doing, because you do not want to duplicate We know there are so many things that are happening in that space out there. Like we've just been advised this morning, there are certain policies we are talking about, and those policies are also already there. We will call them. As you call them, then she can give us our feedback.
Okay, so some of them have already spoken, but they'll continue adding into the discussion. Madam Sheila Yeke, Stephen Odua, Mr. Henok Kirungo, Mr. Mudili Mutuku, and Mr. Matthew Komen. Please take the stage.
Morning. My name is Martha. I'm from Township Reddit, and so I represent many fields, but I just want to talk from a layman's understanding. And congratulations to the guys in front here who have really helped us. I actually didn't know that the sales was abolished, but I think it's since God took me from the market to management, I think that's why I could just know that these things have changed. And that we want to congratulate you for the work that you're doing. But for me, I feel like everything has been said. The only comment that I want to make up and above that is to say speed up. Because most of those things we talk and they are good and we feel like, I wish it can be done tomorrow, but it happens like a mortgage loan. Where a father takes a loan to buy a house and he will die before he has completed the loan. And the only beneficiary becomes the son. So what we are saying is these things are good, but can we speed up the processes so that we also can be able to enjoy the land that God has given unto us? I've just been thinking about this issue of devolution, and yes, it's a good thing. But again, when we go back to the counties, I think one of the reasons why the counties are going into these excessive things, it is because the counties have been told to take responsibility of their own budgets. And again, forgive me for my ignorance, but within this budget, there is also a little bit of corruption. And so as we try to pass these things, it becomes a very tedious process because we still want to budget. As we budget for the county expenses, we still want to budget for corruption inside. And I've been trying to look at corruption from both sides. And from a Pisha point of view, I look at the corruption, yes, as a chronic disease in Kenya, which our government and Mr. President is fighting kufa kupona. And I can only hope we are behind him as he fights this battle. But I'm also looking at corruption as a way of survival. Why? Because the process is too long. By the time you move your goods from Mombasa to Nyeri, the taxes are so high, so I would rather do corruption with an askari and get my goods to Nyeri anyway. So corruption, yes, is a chronic disease, it's very political, but corruption is also in Kenya as a way of survival. So if we standardize our processes and build on our policies and implement what we say, we want to believe it is also one way of fighting corruption. Thank you.
I totally agree with you. You know, we've been fighting corruption, and I believe we even got the religious leaders to give us some divine interventions. I spoke about it because it seems like we are not able to do it. I also agree with you. This was said by Mr. Soji Apampa, who is called Mr. Integrity. He's from Nigeria and he's been fighting corruption. And he says that in Africa, corruption is not a moral issue. Corruption is a survival issue. When it stands between me and the food of my children, naturally I will do it. But that's the reason why we are here, isn't it? That's why we are talking. And we have everybody in this room so that how can we take our country back? How can we make Kenya to be competitive? Because remember, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. If the SME is not able to produce, the government also cannot make money. Because they make money when we make money, isn't it? Thank you. Let me now invite our panelists. Oh, one more? Okay, I'll make that the last one. Because, yeah, so we can move.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hassan Wario. I'm the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, Tana River chapter. I'm very happy today to be with you here. Everything has been said and that has been captured in this policy. but there's some critical observation that I've made. The one which I came across, there's a double taxation that we have talked from the county to county. But there's another double taxation from county itself. For example, when the officers on the ground from the county government, they collect taxes, they have two receipts. One is fake one, and the other one is original one. So the business community on the ground, they pay for the fake one, but when they are coming all around to check for the receipt, they have the fake receipt, they don't have original. So they were meant to pay for another tax. So that issue is very critical and it has to be addressed. And the other thing, those people, we are very happy about the devolutions, and we are all aware that the county government with the county national assembly, they are not in good terms. The bill that is being levied on the business community is 2013, that has been existed, and they have not been amended up to now. So when they come to do the taxation, they bring the bill of 2013, which has not been enacted, and still they are using the same bill. So somebody's from the county government from nowhere just come up with his old figures. When you used to pay 13,000 for the wholesale, so they said, no, this time round, the thing has changed. You have to pay 21,000. That is a lot of problem to the people, and most of the time, the business people, they come to our office for the complaints, and when you go to the same people to raise the same question, nothing is very fruitful. Thank you, God bless you.
Asante Hassan. Hassan is from Tana River. Thank you for coming and for being with us today. Now it's time for our panelists to respond. We have already heard from CRA, but as they are responding, I just would like them to think about two things. Number one, which half of it has already been addressed by Bwana Kaguthi, the critical institutions that we need to engage in terms of addressing this issue. And then what is on everybody's mind, since there are laws already in place, why has there been such slow progress in implementation? Thank you.
I only have 4 comments to make. Number one, I think the business members should also be proactive and go to court. Most of these counties are raising these revenues based on a finance bill, where they have enumerated the fees and charges. Let me tell you, a finance bill does not give you the power to charge a fee or a tax. What is required by the county governments, and I can tell you this because we have been keeping a compendium of which counties have these bills, are the foundation laws. For example, the Single Business Permit and the Rating Act. Those are the foundation laws. So the finance bill only enumerates which areas or which sector the county government is going to collect fees from. Okay? So the first thing that you need to know is that you as a company, you have to look at the bills or the laws within the county. If there's no Single Business Permit or a Rating Act or an advertisement law or assess law, then don't pay it. Go to court and challenge their finance bill. And I'm telling you, the judge will tell them they have no power to raise that revenue. So it's important that you do that. We have a devolution portal that we created with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. I don't know whether it is functioning. James, is it on? Yeah, you can check which laws have been passed by which counties. So the first thing is go to court, be proactive, be aggressive, so that you do not just pay fees that have been put in a finance bill, but they actually have a legislative foundation. Number 2, I think that the critical stakeholders, including National Treasury and the Council of Governors, you need to organize a convention. Because the first time when this matter was brought up, we brought the counties together with the business members of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and they were able to engage one another, and most of them came out of there with a clear understanding about how these issues affect the businesses. Ultimately, these products are being consumed by the residents of the counties. So the government cannot be the ones making the cost of doing business extremely expensive and affordable by business. So it doesn't help in terms of doing business. So I think we need to come together, stakeholders, and agree on a workshop where we bring the private sector and the government together around the table and engage so that they understand that they're making it difficult. The third thing is the county pricing and tariff policy. Counties have a statutory requirement to come up with a county tariff and pricing policy. If the county does not have it, engage the county assembly and the county government, because that is where you will see where the cost of doing business. You can now audit and analyze whether it is necessary to have those tariffs or those pricing. But if they don't have it, and more than often they don't want to because it's an element of, it allows corruption, you know, they are not very quick to tell you where they're charging or where the fees are coming from. And so it's important that you engage with the county governments and the county assembly to come up with county pricing and tariff policy. It should be out there according to the County Governments Act. The final one is the Building Bridge Initiative. You all know about the famous handshake. Has any of you taken time to read what the document talks about? It has 3 critical areas that you can also intervene, and there's a task force that has been set, and they're requesting for memorandums from stakeholders like yourselves. The 3 issues that have been raised in that particular document is corruption, prosperous generation, and devolution. In those areas, you can all have a word or something to say, and especially in this area of doing businesses. You can say, since devolution came up, it is making it difficult for us to do businesses. We are not able to prosper because of the numerous taxations and the double taxations, and there's a lot of corruption because the administration of collecting these fees and charges are not clear, and therefore we see loopholes in terms of you know, the county, you know, being corrupt, because we are not even sure whether this money goes back to the coffers or it goes to somebody's pocket, as you had said, you know, the issue of the fake receipts. So the BBI is out there. There's a task force. It's around for 12 months. You can engage with them. They have requested for memorandums from the public, and so I think you can also use that opportunity to raise the issues as members of the chamber. Thank you.
We have created sensitization. We have seen that we have lost, and my sisters put it that it's good that the BMOs know their rights. They know that they have a voice, and they can take it further and demand for their rights, whether through really going to the governor or through, as she puts it, that we go to the courts. We have rights as Kenyans, businesses. The other thing that has been also going on in terms of really centralizing collection of this fee, one area that has been talked about, although it has not been put into a policy, is the issue of making KRA a collector of these things, so that we have an efficient, effective way of collecting these taxes. Because at the end of the day, the counties are even spending more in terms of collecting these taxes. So they are going into losses. And you had that corruption issue also, you have another problem. So if we really do a bit of mathematics, we might find out that the amount of money that is being collected and the amount of money that is being used to pay the people who are collecting is much higher. So we need to really look at that thing also very critically, so that as we move as a country, we are efficient. We know KRA has been very efficient in tax collection. Why can't we put KRA in charge even collecting taxes for counties and remitting them to counties? These are some of the conversations that we have been hearing, and I think we need to take that thing further. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Stephen Odua. I'm a director in charge of business environment and private sector development in the State Department of Industrialization. We come from the same ministry, Industry Training Cooperatives, with my colleague here, Matthew. Just to start off, I want to thank the Chamber once again for this opportunity of engaging in this subject that indeed, where I sit, where I engage in the private sector, is something that has come up time and again. In terms of, if I may start with already existing situations or words of hope, that indeed this is possible to be done in terms of trying to get one payment point. I know as the ministry, when we are dealing with the ease of doing business, one thing that came up and we decided to deal with is, especially on business registration, that instead of you going to AG chambers, go to NSSF, KRA, as you do your business registration, you go to one single point, you pay once, and you get your business registered. So already that is happening. We have already engaged at the ESC level, whereby we are talking about, for example, weighing of the weighbridge. For the weighbridge, you only are charged in one point. Then as you go through the other weighbridges, you don't pay again. So indeed, we are saying that there are examples existing both at regional and national level on how we can try and address the issue of multiple taxes. With regard to, then that's the purpose actually within the ease of doing business that we came up with a single business permit, which again was very ably presented during the presentation we had. Again, in terms of mutual recognition within the ministry, Kenya Bureau of Standards, and again at the regional level, we have agreed that we'll be recognizing the standard bodies as they do the checkup of particular products. Once you get your product through KEBS standardized, you can have the same product basically sold in Tanzania, Uganda, without again going through the legal process of standards. So that's another example that indeed it's possible to be done. In terms of now how we can address this, I know as a ministry, besides what Komen has mentioned, we have come up, or we are working up with a framework on how we can engage the counties so that we could also, as we look at the business environment, try and disseminate the information and try and agree on how best this can be done. And I want to encourage us in the devolution conference. We'll be presenting there, and we also want to see how we can keep that conversation going now directly with the county governments during the devolution conference scheduled for next month. Again, in terms of how we can now do enforcement, as Kabudi had mentioned earlier, the government is now using the interagency approach. We have seen quite a bit of progress with the corruption. In the ministry, for instance, we have 3 agencies that are dealing with issues of corruptions. Kenya Bureau of Standards, Anti-Counterfeit Agency, Weights and Measures. And indeed, we are seeing quite a bit of progress in trying to use that approach. The beauty of that approach is that, you could then look and innovate based on the various statutes that are existing and based on the various functions of the various institutions to have a holistic approach on trying to address this. And I think based on that, the executive order released by His Excellency recently, that would then be, I would believe, the order of doing business in government in terms of critical issues that need to be addressed. So we look forward to that framework basically addressing that issue more critically. And just like my PS had said earlier, PS Betty Minor, we are actually, in our ministry, also going to see how the committee that we will be chairing can also address some of those issues as an intergovernment approach. Again, in terms of institutions, I think Pamela mentioned quite a bit of them. So the National Treasury, I think, is critical here. The Ministry of Trade ourselves, private sector, so that we can then discuss and see how we can also look at it. And of course, the the county government through the agency to address that issues. So thank you very much.
One, you talked about the MOUs. His Excellency the President is with everybody in the whole world. Whether you are talking about the Pope, you are the President of the US, the guy in China, they have all been here. And he also goes there. And all these MOUs, who are they targeted? I think they are targeted the business community. What can we do to get them out? One thing that I have challenged, for instance, the Minister of Health and some of the corporates, why don't you stop this nonsense of all of us trooping to India because of, say, one item or other of medical? And why can't they bring those? And I think the President had discussed with the President of India, they had agreed on what to do with that. You try to get that MOU, not to throw it is a problem. Can we get all those MOUs signed by our President, because he's our President? He signed it for us, so that they go to the corporate. And because Kenyans are very good, they are carried by mentality a lot, they copy, they exploit, so that we don't have that hiding. Number two, on a day like this, let's get, when you invited in a big organization like this one, what I would have expected are brochures from there, all the way from departments of government saying, like trade, this one, this is how to do it, this one, this is how to do it, this is how to do it, so that we are able now to exploit the interaction with you. And I left Bakumi in October. I can still repeat that if you use the citizen participation in security correctly, and this is the Jubilee Manifesto, 2017-2022, it is stated in the next 5 years, government will enhance citizen participation in security through Bakumi initiative and the committees of peace and security. The meaning of that is this: if the citizens in their small clusters, not big clusters, these clusters, and if you are not in any cluster, something is wrong with you, you do not listen to what the president says. You got to be in some cluster. Hata kama ni nyumba 10, 5 families, 10 families. If you said everybody now pick on corruption, and this is the number you'll be ringing, ukiwa na mtu ambaye iko namna hiyo. Drugs, this is the number you'll be ringing. If you know you do Mbabe, because and when you ring or you SMS is the best, anonymous, so that the country gets hold of corruption. Leave it from Kuko, FBI hapa chini, and finally, for you in trade, there's go to Google. There's something called the Common Informers Act of 1951. It was a UK act when they were bothered the way we are bothered by corruption. And what they say it is, if you know this guy is corrupt, he's selling these things in inflated price, and that's why I'm an it. He. You challenge that, the court will award a certain penalty. You are paid 50% or 60% or that. And you see the initiative of these Kenyans, all the retired police officers will now start pursuing all those they knew, and the bosses stopped it because they were corrupt. Let's all fight it. Sawa sawa. Sorry for intervention.
Thank you so much. I'll just make just quick remarks, just as the seat on the feedback received. I chanced to have been privileged to be one of the consultants for CRA and KM on the development of the finance bills, and it was quite an interesting engagement, which I think has been some counties adopted, other counties are still there, and also a chance to have consulted for KEPSA on review of the policy on county taxation, and the process, the bill on the process for collection of the taxes. So maybe just a quick one. I think, and we always say that we have many laws in this country, and the problem is implementation. Having been involved in legislative development and public policy, I've come to conclude that some laws are unimplementable. So we may be talking about laws are there, we just need to implement, but in principle, they can't be implemented. How they were enacted, how they were prepared, the legal obligations, they are unimplementable. So that we just need that balance to question those why is there implementation challenge? And we realize that some of them are unimplementable. And I have a case in point of the Urban Areas and Cities Act that required that cities have a city board that will be in charge of collecting taxes, revenue, doing the policies and all that. And I asked myself, which governor in Nairobi County, for example, will accept to be voted, and then he appoints a board and gives the board to run the city. So that's an example of a law that cannot be implemented with that particular setup. If you have a city that is rural and urban, then it's easier. Like Kisumu, it's easier. But Mombasa has no, well, it has rural, some places they plant, well, I think the carpet grass. So what we are looking at is not look at the laws that we have, but also let's entertain the thought, can we reflect on why they're not being implemented? And perhaps we may realize the nature, the substance is unimplementable. The quick comment on the policy that the government had done on the inter-county taxation, and having worked on both, I recognize that there were some aspects that, and what we are proposing in the policy. One is that both the bill and the policy, they focus more on the process. When you're raising taxes as a county, this is the procedure. And the process mainly is come and bring those tax proposals to a committee or a task force in Nairobi. The bill and the policy, they do not deal with the standard, the what to. So what you're trying to do, and it's actually complementing, because what the bill focuses on is, before you raise new taxes, can you come to Nairobi and we review them? But now what we are saying is the what. We are talking about the standards. So the bill does not entertain itself into the standards that need to be followed when you're developing those taxes. So for example, we are saying we want a standard on the units of measurement, because we don't want a trader just by moving goods 4 counties, they are already subject to the 4 areas of taxation. This bill would not address that, because it does not ask a county, by the way, we are only allowing the unit of measurement as tonnage, or as the sack, or the different aspect of the quantum. So the complementarity that we are proposing is into the policy is the going the next step, instead of looking just at the process, which the bill looked at, is to ask yourself, can we set the standards? And what you're looking at, and I'll be shortly highlighting that, in governance, public sector management, and regulatory policy move away more from the hands-on regulation, use instruments that allow the users of that law and policy to operate without them always coming back to you. What do you mean by this? Set the standards for the counties, let you follow up on whether they are following the standards, then convert them to you, and say, before you do the law, come back to me, I look at it. What you're looking at, set the standards, say these are the units of standardization. If you're moving goods across the counties, this is the process. So that aspect is what is missing in the policy, and that's what we are complementing. Say that the policy is looking at the process, which is the right direction, but you need to move the regulatory policy into the instruments of standard setting other than show up. Because part of where the acrimony between the counties and national government is, the national government is less providing standards, but they would want to use more of the regulatory policy of, can you come, I look at it and see how it looks. And of course, that has become a challenge in that manner. So having said that, let's look now at enactment commitment in terms of contractual obligations for government, and we're looking at payment to government suppliers. As a consultant, which I've done now for over 10 years now, it's been a challenge always when the client gives you work, and you can see it's a difficult job. It's a sentence, and the client expects that you need to generate mounting out of just a drop. So this was one of the assignments when I was asked to carry it, and I thought, why are you doing it? It's simple. Government is not paying. That's the policy problem. What is the proposal? Pay. So to me, I realized that this one, obviously, is a difficult job, because then the work is completed even at the point of being contracted. Because the answer was simple, just pay. So it gave me time just to reflect. I've been consulting for government, so I've also been part of the process. So it gave me the chance to think through what would you be looking at in terms of the aspect around payment to government suppliers. So again, why are we having this policy brief? Is to generate conversation. And I'm happy that from the first presentation, we have having a conversation. That is the essence of it. A framework that we can use to carry on the conversation. And here we are looking at commitment to contractual obligations by government. Let's say by our government. Now, we have identified few challenges around that, closely related but different. One of the key challenges is non-payment by government for goods and services delivered. This one is purely they will not pay. It will take ages, but it will not be paid. But the second one is delay. So where someone says, this one I have declared it as a bad debt, like I did. I got to a point I said, this one I've classified as a bad debt, let me move on in business. But there are others where they will still be paid, but there is delay. You pay 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and you haven't paid. So this one will come, but it will come after 5 years, or it will come after 2 years. So that's again a major challenge in regard to supply of goods and services. But the other one, which is interesting, is where goods were supplied by the private sector, but all the necessary documentation had not been provided. Now, having consulted for government, all governments globally, they are bureaucracies, and bureaucracy is important. Even the private sector has to borrow from bureaucracy. Well, that's the only way you can safeguard public resources. But also the challenge is sometimes goods are supplied given the immediacy of circumstances. The Procurement Act envisages that it envisages a perfect society and a perfect market, where you prepare a procurement plan at the beginning of the year, financial year, which is okay. The procurement plan is accompanied by other supplementary publicly financed documents like the budget and all that. And that procurement plan, you follow it to the letter until the end of the financial year. If there's deviation, then there has to be a critical justification around it, like maybe an emergency. But what it doesn't appreciate is there is something called political economy. Political economy means that the private and public power is interacting in making political decisions and trying to distribute resources. And so in running a government, there are things that you never envisioned when you're beginning your financial year. There was no handshake. Handshake was not budgeted for at the commencement of the financial year. The task force committee chaired by Honorable Matiang'i, they were not envisaged, but they're incurring money. So what you realize then is that at the point of implementing public services, there are demands for certain public services, demands for certain responses that were not in a procurement plan. So then you realize that certain goods and services may be procured and there is no time for documentation. Now, what this point is indicating that sometimes genuinely private sector suppliers of goods and services have been contracted by government. Sometimes, please understand, we have this pressure, supply to us this aspect, they supply the goods and the government consumes those goods. Now, the tricky bit is that you must have a contract, you must have a local purchase order if it's goods, you must have a local service order if it's services, and there must be a tender committee and a procurement committee. You must have been pre-qualified and all that. And even after being pre-qualified, you must have tenders around that. Now, so what we are saying is, which is a new aspect, if you consumed those goods as a government, do not hide that there was no LSO. Then how did you consume and there was no LSO? I supplied to you timber, and I can see you built. Then you say, by the way, there was no LPO, but you have timber. Do I now come and take away my timber? But you have the guns, so I can't do that. So what we are saying for the private sector, let's introduce new aspects and we'll be looking at it, the challenge where we supply the goods and the services, but and I'm saying all, because you should not supply goods with with word of mouth. Some could be an email, some could be a contract, some could be an LSO, there is no contract. LSO is there, but the tender committee did not meet on a Tuesday, but the document reads they met on a Wednesday. You know, some of those aspects. So that becomes a challenge. And I remember once the late Honorable Saitoti met one of the clients I was working for. They met at night. The meetings around 10. A directive was given that he needed to look at certain documents by morning. So I was called at 11. I said, my guy, in the morning, the minister says we must be in the office by 6. This document must be there. Now, where is the LSO? Government does not contract at night, maybe unless it's for defense. So how do you tell the client you won't work? Now, those are some of the, what I'm saying, some of the realities. That's how you end up supplying goods and services to government, and you didn't have the papers. Now, of course, government does not pay part payment or down payments upon signing of the contract, except, of course, like in some of the unique, like construction and the rest. In principle, government asks you work, then we will pay you after 5 years. So by the private sector, they say upon signing of the contract, you pay like this is 20% or 30% to mobilize the resources. So you find the private sector is incurring all the money because the way the law is crafted, unless those unique contracts where there's certain expectation of the government to pay, majority of it, there is no part payment. Then of course the other one is a non-payment of goods and services by the contractor to the subcontractors. So this is another new aspect that we've looked at. Actually, some of the SMEs and MSMEs who are in trouble and are complaining about payment by government, they were not direct suppliers of goods and services to government. Actually, they were subcontractees. They were contracted by the main contractor to supply the goods and services. The government consumes those goods. In law, government does not know the subcontractee, but that's the person who supplies the goods and services. Now, the main guy, a number of them are paid the money, but they don't pay the subcontractee. And I have dealt with people who actually even now, they supplied, and like one of the players is owed 50 million by the main contractor. But the government ministry paid the money. But the main contractor has refused to pay. So then you're finding that many of the SMEs, because they may not win the multi-billion tenders, they are subcontractors. So what we're looking at is they are also not paid by the main contractor. And we're looking at what are some of the recommendations. Now, the other bit is about the pending bills. Of course, just now looking at more of a summary. Counties, as at, actually this should be 2020, I think that was 2016. The counties owed 108 billion Kenya shillings. National government owed 24 billion, 20 billion. Of course, national government would say, oh, well, as we happy, we're not like the county. No, we only owe 20 billion. Those fellows are actually bad. They owe 100 billion. But now you can see, in principle, government owes about 120 billion. So that becomes a major challenge. The money that ideally would be used for transformation. We just put a summary. I don't know whether you can see there. A summary of some of the counties that owe money. Nairobi County owes 64.8 billion. Now, of course, part of that, you can give a certain percentage of tenders that were either not necessarily irregular or awarded, but inflated. So you can find what they may be saying they owe, or what the auditor, because that's the auditor's report. What perhaps is owed could be certain monies that are inflated bills. But in principle, you can see that Nairobi has the highest. Mombasa has 3 billion, Kisumu 2 billion, Wajir 2 billion, Nakuru 2 billion, and all that. And then Nyamira has about 1.3 billion and the rest. So you can see that if a county owes $1 billion, therefore within a county, at least national government, you can disperse it across the country. But a county, within a local economy, you owe suppliers about 1.3 billion. That's a lot of money. And of course, here you're not looking at also other bills like not payment for taxes or remitting of taxes and other remittances like NHIF and NSF. In fact, there's a county where I'm told one of the insurers cannot take their cards because they don't remit that. So then, therefore, the national government, the department coordinating national government owed about 4.5 billion. Na hiyo ndio serikali. Hiyo ndio serikali. Devolution 2.5 billion, planning 2.5, Department of Interior, because they are different departments, and then urban lands and housing about 1.6 billion. So this is just an indicator of which government agencies owe money. Now, let's look at what is the impact of that. One is the collapse of businesses. In fact, because most of those businesses, that's the money they borrow either for the working capital or the cash flow management. So many businesses actually collapsed. And from the Auditor General's the control of budget, part of the reality is that most of the businesses that were transacting with counties, they collapsed. Of course, one of the challenges is, which is ordinary part of business, some of the businesses were established when the counties came in place. Because now there is more money we can trade with the counties. Part would be dubious because to steal money, but there are many others who are on normal commercial aspects. There is new opportunity for trading with the counties, let's move that direction. So many businesses have actually collapsed. Then you can see what is the impact of the collapse. And one of the key informants that we interviewed during this study, actually, they constructed some hospitals for a county government, for 2 counties. Everything was followed, all the documents were clear. They constructed, patients are using those hospitals. They were never paid, they closed that business. So that's an example of literal collapse. And of course, you send the workers home. Then of course, the suppliers who have supplied goods and did not have all necessary documents, they are told, show us the LSO, show us your LPO, show us the contract. We can't see the tender committee minutes. We can't see the procurement committee minutes. The envelope was not returned to who. The date is a problem. We can't see the goods. Of course, there were fruits, so they were consumed. So what then you're saying is that this category is left out. And then the question is, then why should you consume? And I'm going to comment on that. And of course, the other one is that many workers are being laid off. And this is actually a reality. That many guys who are owed money by government, they laid off their workers around that. Of course, non-performing loans in the banks. There's an interlinkage. Earlier it was mentioned that we have done another policy brief on access to credit. And part of the linkages around this, most of those SMEs that trade with government and they are owed money by government, they had borrowed money. Except the people who supply goods, people who do construction works, most of them, they borrow money. No, the LPO finance, they borrow money. People like us, we only sell our intellect, the head. So I sell my time and I sell my brain. So I don't go to the bank to borrow money. But the other guys, they suffer because they mobilize capital from the banks. They were never paid. So that is contributed to non-performing loans. And then looking at the central bank report, even the central bank has indicated that one of the key indicators, key contributors for non-performing loans is actually non-payment by government. The chief regulator in monetary policy says government is actually contributing to non-performing loans. Then of course the other one is the capital being auctioned, especially the guys doing construction. They borrowed money from the banks. When they could not pay, their capital was auctioned. In fact, I had cases I dealt with where the plant and equipment was auctioned because now you cannot pay. So that person has been rendered, in principle, almost useless because they cannot trade. So not just the non-performing, but also the assets have been auctioned. Of course, the other one is being referred to the credit reference bureaus because, of course, you've become a defaulter. Then, of course, reduced government revenue, increases in unpaid trade credit portfolio. Now, this came from the stakeholders when we were discussing. One of the realities that we have forgotten to address from the trade policy is actually trade credit. We have focused very well, which is right, on financial credit. So there is a whole regulatory framework around financial credit. You borrow money from the bank. But trade credit is rarely engaged in terms of our framework. And in principle, there is an estimation of about 500 billion plus of trade credit. Money you owe to your suppliers. Give me this phone, I'll pay you in 3 months. You don't pay back. So what is happening is most of the suppliers of goods to government, they also owe money to other traders. Because I went to the bank, or you're my supplier, I took goods from you because I knew these guys would pay. So when I took the goods from you, these guys did not pay. I owe you for those goods. So there's a lot of trade credit, and that is actually less discussed. And that is contributing to other business collapse because the guys they lent their goods to have not yet paid back. Then the other one is, of course, reduced trust in terms of government supply chain management. When now traders are saying, hey, including myself, when I see, and I love working with government, all my work has to be revolved around public sector. But in principle, which is now personal, when I see even counties say pre-qualification, they say we want people to draft laws, policies, I say no. So I only work for them if I'm paid by like a development partner. Why? Because now you do not trust they would pay. I have talked to the guys we interviewed, people now are avoiding, except where things are clear, they're avoiding dealing with the government. You know you don't want government to be branded as such in the entire value chain in terms of goods and services. And of course, high pending bills have contributed to slow growth in the GDP. Of course, from economic perspective, if you're locking 120 billion, you're not giving it to the economic activities that they were meant to, that reduces the growth of the GDP. If businesses are closing, labor market integration is going down, then of course we wouldn't talk about the growth of the GDP. So that actually is contributing that. So then the last part, second last part, what are the policy gaps around that? So one is that the procurement of goods and services in respect to a financial year where government procures without commitment to pay the pending bills. So the law, the Procurement Act, does not necessarily and does not entertain. They will tell you procurement plan this year. The Public Finance Management Act will tell you budget, but there is no conversation that, by the way, can you pay what you owed first before you procure new ones? So that is already a policy gap. There is no obligation to pay first before you borrow others. You are like these friends who keep on borrowing all the workmates. And now you know, Kirago at Kuomba Pesa, don't touch, because they have borrowed everyone else. So that's part of it, because they will not pay back and they're still borrowing. So that's one of the policy gaps. The second one is unpredictability of timelines of disbursement. And that is already a challenge that has been raised. Part of the challenge is not just the counties. The way the Treasury disburses the money and the tranches sometimes makes it difficult for counties to pay. Because when the money comes after a dry period of, let's say, 3 months, not 3 months, quarterly is appropriate. Like after 5 months or 4 months, but it's in lower tranches, they do priority first. Staff, especially nurses. Then you pay the doctors. Then now, the other people can be paid after. So it becomes difficult for them to actually pay the suppliers. Then of course the other one is the law not permitting advance payment, except exceptional circumstances. The private sector, that's how we survive. I get the contract, upon signing the contract, maybe 20% or 30%. That is what I use now to move and do your work. But now if no one will pay you, then comes a time when you can't fuel your car, you cannot pay for your bills, you can't pay your workers. So that's part of it as a gap. Then the other one is the Public Finance Management Act does not, of course it obligates, both with the Procurement Act, does not obligate the payment in terms of the pending bills like I required. There is no legal obligation. You're only required to show us the budget for this financial year and show us the procurement plan. But you're not obligated. Can you show us what you never paid so that you pay them first before you move on? And of course the other one is the mandatory requirement for prompt payment. Of course the law provides that upon delivery of the goods, then you pay. But then what is lacking is the mandatory requirement. It must be prompt. And I'm going to recommend what exactly are the policy measures we're recommending. And of course the other one is a lack of legal protection for suppliers of goods and services without all, and I'm saying all necessary documents, but a certain level of documentation. In law, we talk about implied contracts. There's the express contract, it was written and signed. There's implied contract. If I give you this computer and I was in the business of selling, you cannot say that it was your birthday, so I gave you like that. The law presumes that you're holding it in trust. Therefore, it's implied that there was a contractual relationship. So what you're trying to talk about is a policy gap in the private sector, and courts will tell you, they imply even employment contract. If you paid someone continuously every other month, it is implied that you employ them. If you supplied goods to someone, even if there were no documents, and they consumed, in private sector, the law presumes there was an implied contract. So we are saying there is a gap in the public sector. Then of course the last one is that the Procurement Act would provide for interest, like if you don't pay interest, but doesn't provide, how do we determine the interest? When do we determine the day that interest starts accruing? I sent my invoice in March, but then you say, yeah, it was in March, but the director was not there. So it has not been received or no, it should count when we got treasury disbursements. So the challenge is at what point do that interest start accruing? And then the reality is if you supply goods and services, hardly, except on circumstances, and the money is big time, we don't like suing government. Because tomorrow I'll still come back and trade with you. So that's why for me I said the bad debt. Because I can't take you to court and you will be my client. So that's sometimes people say, how do you go about it? But of course if it's the billions, then of course you can go into court. But that now, and we're going to recommend that, there is no mechanism of determining finally, the rate is there. When does it accrue and when do we determine that? Ladies and gentlemen, the last part, policy recommendations. So one, we are recommending review of various frameworks. So the first part is on procurement. So the National Treasury to initiate review and amendments of the Procurement Act on various aspects. One, the prompt payment on full contractual sum upon satisfactory supply of goods and services within 30 days, and of course not maximum, so that it is definite. Then the other one is for the contractors to include any subcontract in the contract. And I'm going to share just a best practice from UK, whereby, and we're saying, maybe a good percentage of our non-paid private sector suppliers were not the first contractors with the government, they were subcontractees. So we want to bring in the change in the law, so that when you're coming to bid for your work, and it's your 1 million, 10 million, 20 million work, you must show who are the people subcontracted. As you know, we also have tenderpreneurs. And they were emerging from the NYS report. They got the tender, but they can't do the work. So they subcontract. The guy who is crying is the guy who did the work. So what you're saying is, in your contract, include, we want to see as government, who are the guys you have subcontracted. And upon paying you, we also want to see at what point are you going to pay them. So that if you do not pay your contractees for the first contract, we blacklist you. You will not get any other contract if you don't do that. The second one is now on the Public Procurement Administrative Review Board. Of course, the board usually reviews the challenges, questions, conflict around procurement. And we were thinking you don't need to form another government agency to look at that. So just assign that board the mandate to review the contract, the interest accruing on a contract that has not been paid by government. That becomes easier. You don't create a new board, but a new body, but you just assign more functions to the board that has existed, so that if they don't pay me for 5 years, I go to that board to determine that actually your interest are accruing in June. And from that time, the decree is issued that then the government agency should pay you money from that particular time. Then of course the annual audit of procurement plan and the implementation to ensure that that the goods and the contracts that have been the goods supplied and contracts entered into have been paid for. And here we are looking at the express contracts and the implied contracts. So what we are looking at here is, before a procurement plan is approved for the following financial year, audit the previous one and show which goods were procured for and which have not been paid for. So to avoid always recruiting and getting new contractors, but you've not paid the other one. And then the last one is the administrative measures, especially in regard to staff. If the full documents have not been supplied for, the goods were consumed by government, then you go for your staff. Pay the contractor, then let your staff be surcharged. If the systems were not fully dealt with. And of course, then the second category of recommendations is on the Public Finance Management Act. So the first one is on establishment of project bank accounts. And this it works a lot in UK, whereby, especially for infrastructure projects, whereby money is paid into that project account. So there is no single day when that money is not there. So that after every disbursement from National Treasury and the County Treasury, money for project is directly taken there. It's not diverted to do other things. As you know, politics is interesting. So money that is, actually the people who are normally not paid are the ones who do the genuine work. So for infrastructure projects, have project bank accounts or funds that specifically money is paid into those accounts. Then the other one is a mandatory requirement for government to factor in payment of suppliers in each cash flow plans. Every quarterly, you must do your cash flow plans and project, so that the control budget, before they approve, they will know how much you're planning to spend. In that plan, you must indicate when are you going to pay your suppliers. So what we're doing here is, the law is there, but there are certain aspects that are making it weak, is what we're proposing to recommend. And of course, the other one is for pending bills to be paid within the following financial year. So you're saying if you owe money, the genuine supply of goods and services for this financial year, it should not go beyond the second financial year. So you should budget for, at the time of preparing the budget, you must factor in all the payments. So the maximum that a pending bill can go is 2 years. Beyond that, then it should not work. Then the other one, of course, increasing budget control by the control of budget, especially compliance with procurement plan. Yes, the plan is there, not just that you complied with it, but we also want to see the compliance that you procured within the law, but that you also paid for the goods and services that were procured. Then of course the other one is requiring quarterly and annual reports on the amount spent on procurement, the paid bills, and of course in terms of the payments. What we're looking here is accountability. It should not be surprising us that counties owe us 100 billion, or national government owe us 20 billion. It should not be a surprise. What they should be doing is every year, there are quarterly reports. This is how much we spent, just the way they normally do quarterly reports or on programs. This is what we did. This is how much we paid our suppliers. Of course, the other one is midterm review of the procurement plan. This is the government sometimes does it like that. That you want to be stuck, even for budget, except the appropriation, around January when you do the supplementary appropriation. But the procurement plan done at the beginning of financial year should not be cast on stone. Why? Because things, we do change. So in the course of the financial year, things change. So that you allow, but within the standards, not that it's a free for all, but within a standard, so that you prevent this thing that is procurement outside the procurement plan. That way then you can try and facilitate a kind of an objective way of procuring goods and services within the law, but some things that are maybe outside the procurement. Because part of the reason why some people are not paid, the control of budget says this one was not in the procurement plan. How did you procure? The next thing, you're a client of Haji, DPP. You procured, it was not in the plan. But everyone can see, by the way, handshake was there, so you needed to finance handshake. It had not been budgeted for. Then, of course, the budget, the audit of both pending bills, not just the ones with all the documents, but even where government consumed, it's being seen from the lips that government is sugar. But all the documents may have been missing. So audit for that. And of course, the other one we're saying, all the pending bills should be paid before the end of 2019. Of course, as we dialogue, then you can say, no, okay, why can't we extend it to 2020? The last part, what is the impact for that? We're just talking about improving productivity. If you pay the people the 120 billion, then that means that jobs will be created, business will have their working capital and the cash flow management and all that. Stabilizing the labor market, because people will not be losing jobs just like that. Because I'm not being paid, can you go home? So on one hand, the government cannot be saying that one of their priorities is employment. On the other hand, we are not paying the companies. So they are actually closing. So that, again, creates a disconnect. And of course, improved GDP, because then the money is being put into production. Then, of course, trust in government, where now business to government relationship is enhanced. And then the government can get a good supplies. And I can tell you the reality, like for the counties and given government, some of the good consultants don't like trading with government. So what is happening is that they get the fake guys. So those are the ones available. They can work without papers because they know they will get money out. Another part of the reality when there is no trust in government. And of course, the other one is stability in the monetary sector, because the non-performing loans, for us to deal with them, let's pay the guys who owe banks the money. If we pay them, we stabilize the monetary sector. And then, of course, reducing of non-performing trade credit, and I mentioned about it. If we pay the suppliers, they will pay the people who they took the goods from. Again, that becomes a reality. And of course, the other one is increasing accountability in procurement. Then lastly, ladies and gentlemen, every good speaker says, I'm ending 7 times. I've been saying lastly, I think now this is my third time. So I still have 4 more times to say lastly. And now the last one is the best practice. Remember, we're ending with the best practice. We looked at UK and how they deal with payment of their suppliers. One, contracting authorities are required to pay valid and undisputed contracts within 30 days. And from the report, that is coming out very well. 2, invoices must be verified in a timely manner without any delays. That's part of the challenge way what our traders are saying. By the time the verification process is there, the invoice, it's okay, you supplied, 3 months, 4 months are over. So that becomes a challenge. But for them, is verification is done. Then the other one is the contractors must include the guys they subcontracted in terms of prompt payment. So once they are paid, within 60 days, they must pay the guys who are subcontracted. And that's part of where most of our SMEs are. The guys who are paid by government, they haven't paid. Then of course the other one is a code. Government suppliers, they sign a code, a voluntary code, managed by the private sector actually, in collaboration with the equivalent of the Ministry of Trade, whereby they commit in that code to pay subcontractors within 60 days of paying that. Though it's a soft mechanism, but they are reporting that this code is working. And they publish it in their website. These companies have signed to the code, and they commit, once I'm paid within 60 days, I'll pay my subcontractors. That's an aspect that would save most of our SMEs. Then the other one, of course, is establishment of project bank accounts for managing construction projects. What I had mentioned earlier. So project accounts for infrastructure is already a practice in UK. And of course, the other one is large government contractors. They are required to report on payment practices. So again, in part of the code, like these are the 2 billion, 3 billion, 1 billion, 500 million contractors. They must report their practices in terms of the payment. That way, ladies and gentlemen, you deal with government paying, subcontractors paying, and of course, you improve the environment. Then the last one is just two things. The non-payment is impeding business growth, 120 billion owed, and then of course, that non-payment is affecting the monetary policy and the monetary sector. That the banks are crying that they sign non-performing loans, and the chief regulator of financial policy said it is part of it, not the whole. Part of it is non-payment of suppliers. If the chief regulator said that, ladies and gentlemen, who am I to deny?
We would now like to invite feedback as far as delayed payments is concerned. What Wanawashiro told us, there is 3 types. The first one is where the government simply says, I'm not going to pay you. That's it. There's nothing much you can do about it. They will not pay. The second one is where you now decide, I've followed this payment for so long, I might as well just write it off as a bad debt because it can never be paid. And the third one is where, you know, Kenyans, we are so good. We even invent the English language. I don't know if it's in Oxford Dictionary, something called tenderpreneurs. Are they there? We invented that, isn't it? And this is where someone, because I know someone, I get a tender, and then I get people like me and Kiragu, sisi ni watu wa mkono, you do the job, the guy has been paid, but the guy doesn't pay you. This is a problem. No country ever grows in such a case. And remember, it is the SMEs. It is that Mama Mboga who tomorrow will be at Tuskys. And we need to make sure that lady, that gentleman, that young man actually grows. So ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open. I would like feedback from you before we call our panelists to respond and tell us what's going on, what's happening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nyambura. Apart from doing business, I'm a director at SASRA, which is a state corporation. But I'm just asking myself, as a chamber, are we inward looking? Where have we failed the traders or the business community as a chamber? Because I'm just seated here and I'm thinking, we have the law, we have a constitution, yet the government per se is not implementing the constitution which we vowed to keep and to implement. Because when you look at the Procurement Act, it's illegal, especially a government entity, to engage a supplier if you don't have money in the account. Period. There is no two-way about it. So I think for me, I'm thinking that is where the chamber comes in. When you write there in broad letters that trade facilitation, what do you mean? Because we are not facilitating the business community in doing trade. The other one is about treasury, and I'm asking myself, is treasury represented here? Fine, thank you, because I was thinking we are talking to ourselves. Treasury approves the budget for the government institutions, and later they approve the procurement plan. When they do this in the understanding that there are certain activities which are going to be procured within that procurement plan. When at the end of the fiscal year, they say that if you have money in the account, return to us. Surely, what do you mean? That we return money to you, yet you approved a procurement plan. How do you expect me to pay the suppliers, yet you're telling me to give you back the money because I can't absorb? Seriously? I find sometimes government hard to understand. The other issue is about the business permits. Like, I have an example where you pay the single business permit, and as a small trader, maybe you are told to pay 10,000. Then there is another amount hidden behind that. You pay like 2,500 or 1,500. You are told it's for, I don't know whether they call it public health something. And I'm asking myself, if I have an office for consultancy, surely do I need to pay that? For what? And when I'm given that permit, it's written, blah, blah, this company paid 10,000. It doesn't show the 2,500 that I paid for the public health, and still chamber, still come in and help the business community. Thank you.
Good morning. Is it morning or afternoon? My name is Chris Arunga. I work for Metropole Credit Reference Bureau, and we are the people who are most accused when SMEs are listed. And I just want to say that proactively we are running a program with Kncci, which helps SMEs to collect debt. So we are calling it non-judicial proactive debt collection technique, and all of us are invited to attend through PENA, of course. So the chamber is already doing something, so it's upon you also to come in and learn something about how to collect debts. Now, our contribution again to this matter, at times it calls for courage to be able to address this issue, this concern, because, for example, you've heard the consultant saying that it's not easy to take the government to courts. However, at the same time, the government is going to kill your business. So at some point we are saying that, yeah, maybe you may not be able to take the government to court because it may take a long time to recover your money. But the law is already there that establishes a mechanism for credit information sharing. So suppliers who have supplied the government can actually come and list the government, just the same way the bank has listed you on the bureau. You can actually come and list the various government departments or other state corporations that you've done business with. While they may not necessarily care if you list them, because they'll get their money from the treasury, but we can take that report and give it to His Excellency, the President, and say, you gave an order for your ministries to pay, and these are the ministries which are not paying. So I'm saying that law is already there. She rightfully puts it. Kenya is not, does not lack laws. The laws are already there. The only thing that is required is to give you information, and that information is necessary to help you to collect your debts. By the way, you need to understand that the CRBs do not just exist for the banks, it also do exist for traders like yourself. And we invite you to come, and not just to list, but also to do due diligence. Before you trade with even a government institution, you may realize that some other traders have listed these guys, and you know that if you go in there, you're going to burn your fingers. And so for assessment, you can come, and you can also come to list those governments. So I think it's a high time that we stop crying foul when there is something that we can do. Because if the president has said pay, and someone is not paying, then there's something that you can do from your side to ensure that you basically get paid. So I think that was my contribution. Thank you so much, and I hope that most of you will be engaging with us to ensure that you collect your debts.
You know, they say, before you can get cured, I'd use a bad example, but kindly indulge me. Before you can actually get cured from alcoholism or drugs, what do you need to say? You need to accept, isn't it? And you say, my name is so-and-so. Okay, I can't say Fatma is a drug addict. But I'll say, my name is so-and-so, and I am an alcoholic. Now, advocacy, it is said, is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Because when you engage, just like what Akiragu has done, you will be told, why are you saying this? Who told you this? So what you need to do is to get the necessary research, confirm your figures before you engage. And that is exactly what we have done. This has been an 8 months journey, Kirago, an 8 months journey to reach where we are. Having said that, I totally agree with you. Yes, this is what as chamber we need to do, and we have taken that step forward. On the other hand, we need members to come on board so that we understand the issues of members. When you tell people to join, not everybody understands. They're only looking at the amount of money that they will have to pay. They're not looking at what am I going to get. Again, point taken, it basically means as chamber, we need to enhance our sensitization on what efforts or what we are going to give our members. So on both sides, point taken, and we will take that up. And of course, we also have the tenderpreneurs, because as Kiragu said, there are some people that have been paid by the government. Let's not just flout the government. They've been paid. But what have they not done? They have not paid the subcontractors. I'll give you an example. When we were training devolution last year, we were told each county, the amount of the contract was actually 50 million. This is what the government was doing. Okay, I'm not naming names, but there are some people who were given the contract and they had no idea how they're going to get that job done. So they went to the KYMs, si tunajua KYMs, watu wa mikono, to do the job. They were paid, but did they pay the people who actually did the job? And I think it is important, borrowing from the UK, when you go for a contract, we must tell the government, Fatma and Company Limited is undertaking this project, and these are the sub or the associates that Fatma and Company is going to come with. Because tomorrow, the people you subcontracted have nowhere to go. Who even knows you did the job? So these are the policy gaps, the policy issues, and the recommendations that we need to take up. So as much as we are bashing, we also need to do what? Look at ourselves as well.
I just wanted to confirm what are before the evolution, there was a trade joint loan that usually you give to the business people to empower the SMEs. Now, since the devolution came, we never had any trade loans. So all the money that has been taken to the county government, they put into a structure. Like, for example, I know a place where the market was built at 350 million. That one is just from the county to the contractor. But if you're keen enough and you pay 15 million to business people, at least SMEs, the mamambogas can get a portion of 50,000 shillings to cover 1,000 traders, which will empower the life of the business people. So I beg, maybe you take this into account to introduce the same so that our business people can benefit next time. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bilai Inyanya. I'm a relationship manager at Family Bank. I'm very grateful for Kiragu and the KNCCI for this policy document, which has an effect to banking industry. For instance, I had a businessman and he called me to represent him, who has a business, and he had gotten some investors. And they asked him, I want to talk about the non-performing loan. How are you graded? Most of the county government and most of the businessmen here, we have tough times with them because the government having failed to pay them, basically they go being granted. And when an investor asks you, I always ask, what is the non-performing loan percentage for most banks is affected by the non-payment of these suppliers and service providers and our account holders in bank. So I just stood up to appreciate this. And as everybody says, including Fatma, is the implementation. And there's a lady who asked, what are we doing as KNCCI and how soon? So it will even help us in the banking industry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
What are we doing? We've started bringing the conversation out in the open, now that we are talking about it. We are engaging stakeholders, and I am so grateful to our previous panelists, and they told us exactly whom we need to talk to. So we will come knocking so that we can ensure that implementation gets done. We may look at certain aspects and see which is a low-hanging fruit and get that done first before we go into the much, much harder ones. As you would appreciate, the issue of tenderpreneurs may not be as easy as we are saying it because there are too many vested interests. I would now like to welcome our panelists to come to the front and tell us what has been done, and again, please, why such slow progress? Because some of these things have been there for long, and yet we seem to be flat-footed as far as implementation is concerned. Thank you.
My name is Muleli from Kncci. It's a policy and research institute. Let me begin by thanking the Chamber for providing us a platform in which we can exchange our views on these pertinent issues. I'll respond to some of the issues which have been raised during the plenary and also during the presentation. And one of them was on the issue of non-payment of goods and services by government. Well, there are two sides to this. There are instances where there are issues with the exchequer or where there have been budget cuts, so affecting the eventual payment of the goods. But there's also the other side where the documentation by the suppliers is wanting. And this is not the issue where they have been ambushed. No, I'm talking about a case where the due process was followed, but when it comes to payment, the suppliers, maybe they have no idea of what to attach. Sometimes there are many documents which are required for you to be paid. And so regarding this, I think we may need to advise or recommend that we have a checklist. For example, every ministry, department, agency, or even county governments, they have a very comprehensive checklist that if you've done ABCD, for you to be paid, you need to bring ABCD. Once this is done, expect your payment. I think that needs to be done because some of the suppliers, they are very new in the business. Some of them are youth, some of them are women who are taking advantage of the AGPO, so they are not very experienced. And so that's also has been a case, because I've seen it in one of the ministries where there's money for payment. Before Kncci, I used to work in the ministry. There's payment, but we're actually looking for the suppliers to bring the necessary documentation for them to be paid. Then there was also the issue of law on procurement. Where it was being suggested that entities should not procure without a budget. Actually, that's already in the procurement plan, no, not plan, the law. So actually, what needs to be done is for it to be enforced. No entity, no private sector, agency is required to procure without when there's no money. So that one just needs to be enforced. And then there was also another recommendation where the National Treasury needs to establish a task force to audit and review pending bills. Actually, this task force is already there. I think maybe what needs to be done is to find out the extent to which they have succeeded in the implementation of the recommendations. It's already there. So it's an issue of enforcement again. Then the issue of non-payment to SMEs who have been subcontracted. There was a proposal to come up with a framework. I think that one I also highly recommend, whereby maybe there should be a third party or a way of finding out whether that person who was subcontracted has actually been paid. I think we need to come up with a mechanism to ensure that it's actually done. When maybe the real supplier is paid, he also shows that he has paid that the person who has been subcontracted. Then there's also another issue where the government and county governments are not paying pending bills from the previous financial years. Actually, it may not be explicitly in the procurement law and the PFM Act, but actually it's normally provided for in the National Treasury circulars. Actually, it normally says that pending bills should form the first charge in the beginning of every financial year. So again, it's an issue of enforcement. And maybe you could find out, maybe the chamber and maybe other players can also find out, or maybe do a study to find out the extent to which this one is being done. Because most of the times you find maybe the county governments or the government agencies, they ignore that. And they continue procuring other things. Then there was also, there are also other challenges which may not have been mentioned, which have also brought about these pending bills. You realize, like in the last maybe 5 or 6 years, there have been a frequent reorganization of the government. So you find maybe when you supplied an agency or maybe a directorate which was, let's say, in the Ministry of Environment, and that department after 2 years has been moved to another ministry. So by the time that thing is verified, it takes a very long time. We have had cases like that, and maybe it happens like 2 or 3 or 4 times. So when you go to the new ministry, you are referred to your mother ministry where you came from. And before that verification is done, it takes a while. So that one has also been an issue causing these pending bills. In the recommendation, you say that there's need for cash flow plans, and I think that's also already in place. It's provided for in the annual work plan. Actually, once you prepare the annual work plan, you're also required to prepare the cash flow plans. So it's also an issue of enforcement. Then the other one is allowing for a review of procurement plan, and especially when there are emerging issues. This is also provided for by the National Treasury. But what's required is that before you review, you have to seek for approval. So it's also an issue of enforcement. Then one of the things I think that can also be included in the recommendation, which the government stands to gain when we pay promptly, is getting value for money. Because what has been happening is that the private sector, because they anticipate delayed payments, they charge very high margins. So if there was prompt payment, that's an incentive for the government for them to pay, for us to pay promptly. So I think that one should also come out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very well articulated. Again, let me thank the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry for creating this platform. It forms a basis for us to look really hard and say, where is the problem? Because there is a problem which we need to deal with candidly. Is it for lack of law? I think that we have agreed. It is not for lack of law, it's not for lack of regulation, it is the way we are doing things. When we started looking at pending bills, particularly in relation to the counties, some of the things that came out were a little distressing to the naked or to the person who is looking at them. And I'll share with you a bit, without necessarily going into very fine details, that one, the biggest cause was the process of procuring these services. And the biggest contributor to that was politics and the business people. Politics in that you would find a situation where in the heat of the moment, a person says, I want this project done now. And the nearest contractor is told, can you come on Monday and do this? And the business person does not start. He just says, it's a good opportunity, go ahead, do the process. After you look at that is, you find yourself unable to be paid. Reason, there is no document at all. And therefore, that was one of the biggest problems that we found. The next was a situation where there was no budget at all for a project. And therefore, when you go to the people who pay, and they are called accountants and they are said to be stingy, I don't know about that. They tell you, no, there is no money to pay for this. You have all your documentation and invoice and you're being told, no, there is no money to pay for it because it was not in the budget. And therefore we need to really go back and address that. There is also the clear position where there is no money at all, simply because it was supposed to be done last year, and because of the entire long procurement process, you find out, oh, the money has been returned back to Treasury in the case of national government institution, and back to the county revenue fund in the case of county governments. And therefore, when they are reverting the money, the project is lost. It was genuinely funded in 2017-18. It wasn't done in that year because of delays in procurement. And in 2018-19, it disappears, but the contract has already been awarded. What happens in that case? And that is also common. I go back to the procurement law because there has been a lot of discussion about the procurement law. It provides methods for all kinds of procurement. It's only that in a number of cases we take shortcuts. There is even a definition of what an emergency is if you want to procure for emergency purposes, and it is in the law. So in the event that you want to do a procurement which requires to be done overnight because there has been an attack or there has been an outbreak of a disease, then there is a provision in law. So if you follow the right procurement process, then you are not likely to get in trouble when it comes to payment. Let's agree with ourselves that as a business, we have also taken shortcuts when trying to get the business. And because you are dealing with somebody you know, or we are dealing with somebody who is in the system, and there is the oiling or the greasing of the process, you end up paying money which you should not pay in the first place, and then later you find yourself asking or being asked, or the person who had interest took their cut and left, and you cannot, there is nobody who wants to touch that paper because it's dry paper. Know what I mean? Yeah, nobody wants to touch it after the process has gone. If we follow the right procurement process, cut all the corruption and the cutting of corners, we will find that we do the right thing and we get paid at the right time. Lastly, and this is just a repetition of what my friend has said, is that pending bills are supposed to be first charged when doing the next budget for the country and for any institution that is funded through public funds. In that case, then, we should never have a pending bill which is genuinely supplied. We can only have a pending bill where there is no indication of how it was contracted, and therefore nobody wants to touch it, particularly in the era of fight against corruption, because the moment you make that payment, then somebody is asking you, how did you pay? How was it contracted? If you look at what is happening around the country currently, everything around corruption is about procurement. In most cases, it's about procurement. So if you don't procure right, anybody who touches that document is likely to be in trouble for abuse of office, for not following the procurement law, and therefore it becomes difficult for you to get payment even when we can touch what you supplied. I have an experience, which will be my last story, an experience in one of the counties where I found a governor and his team sitting on a very good set of furniture. And they said, we have not paid for this furniture. I asked why they are here. You tell there was no order, there was no committee, there was nothing. The only thing that existed was a text message. Give us this, send us these seats. And of course, nobody wants to pay because it was ordered during the previous regime. The person who was supposed or the governor at that time has been voted out, and the next person does not want to touch it because of its political or its implication in terms of corruption. So I think we need to, as a private sector, still deal with it in that way. Thank you.
I'm Ishman from Association of Kenya Suppliers. I know it's around lunchtime and our energies are a bit low, but I'll try to go through what I have very, very fast so that we don't take too much of your time. Now, as Association of Kenya Suppliers, and I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce. They worked so hard in actually trying to address these issues of prompt payment or late payment. I know this is an active discussion that also attracted the attention of the President, and he gave a directive sometime last year on prompt payment. And in the directive, he was actually concerned about the domestic trade, the issues were involving supermarkets and suppliers. That one prompted the State Department of Trade actually to reach out to member associations of suppliers and manufacturers. We gave our input. There was a study. It yielded to regulation, voluntary code. Well, it's a long story, but in short, what we are saying is this is an active issue that needs intervention from every sector, including the government. Now, the issue that we are trying to address here is government now being a default. On the other one, it was business to business. This is business to government. Government is the default. And you look at government as super strong. He is the strongest person here. And definitely having that dominant powers, the supplier is on the receiving end. And in most cases, what we look at is where is the supplier placed in the hierarchy. And in most cases, we are unsecured. We represent suppliers who are unsecured. And being unsecured, it means their dealings are actually not considered so much. Now, coming back to what is on the table at the moment, the government and suppliers, they've not been paid. How should it be done? And somebody mentioned about implementation. Yes, we have laws, but implementation, I can assure you, in UK, they have a directive, late payment directive, and it has achieved 93% success, meaning implementation can be operationalized actually to work for those who are affected. If they can achieve in 2016, 2017, it achieved 93% success, meaning invoices that was government were paid within 30 days as required by the regulation. And what I was thinking on my side on being a representative of suppliers, well, these international best practices, they've been working somewhere else. And how should we adapt? And it's good enough. The consultant has actually worked around and sourced most of this regulation, which can actually be adapted in Kenya. It can address issues in Kenya. And beyond and above that, I would propose maybe to consider automation. We have this swift transfer. In retail, there is a system that can transfer your funds direct to supplier when goods goes through the till. Meaning, if our supplied goods worth 10 million, each day I'm selling 500,000, maybe or less, that money goes direct to my account at the end of the day. Now, can government also consider this one as one of the very important, that if a supplier has supplied government by the 30th, on the 31st, there's a swift transfer of funds from government coffers to the supplier. Now, it's a big discussion, I know. I don't know if government is willing to engage in that direction, but we have systems in place that can actually address or can perform to that extent. Now, the other day, I saw Moses Kuria also proposing something on the same line, on late payment, and he was proposing a promissory note. Can government, personnel actually issue promissory notes, meaning if you've not been paid, 30 days elapsed, you issue a promissory note, we can use it a bank. Well, it's a direction, discussion in the right direction, but we don't know now how effective that can be. And such individuals who have ideas of that kind, also Kncci is the chair of trade department, committee, such to have information or some ideas that can be co-opted and give breadth to what we are discussing at this level. When we were dealing with the issues of retail and the retail market, we proposed two things, regulation and a voluntary code. Now, when it comes to voluntary code, it's a voluntary. You can choose to or you can choose not to act on it, but it's based on voluntary, it's more voluntary. But when we look deeper to the issues, we realize there must be a fallback. Yes, we've seen that on working in Australia, the grocery food and food chain. But in UK, they prefer a statutory code, which has a legal backing. And I think these are discussion in the right direction that, well, we can have the voluntary, at the same time have a statutory code that can actually enforce as a fallback. And lastly, I would wish to ask maybe Chamber to consider what the Minister of Trade under the State Department of Trade is working on. There's a trade bill which is active at the moment. We've suggested to government through State Department of Trade, if we can co-opt this regulation that we are developing into a trade bill, or can it be under competition authority? And in those active discussions, then we are bringing in now the maybe this issue on late payment to suppliers or supplying government. I think it will give it a bigger which can actually attract the attention of every other individual who is concerned about issues of suppliers in Kenya.
Like has been mentioned earlier, the government actually has quite a bit of systems and processes in place that try and address some of the issues raised during the presentation. For example, on the issue of whether we have cash flow projections. Actually, for every ministry, department, and agency, as you do your budget process, the first thing you're supposed to do as a submission is to submit a work plan, a procurement plan, and a cash flow projection. So that is actually envisaged right at the beginning of a financial year. Then there's also the introduction of the e-procurement as a module within the Integrated Financial Management Information System. But of course, probably, I think its usage and benefits could be accrued more with more use of the same. It's currently still at the initial stages, but that is a system which hopefully will also address the issue of documentation, because now each payment, if it has to go through the system, at each stage of the system, the document should be there before the LSO is actually issued. So that's another way of trying to address that. There was a suggestion that probably we should try and see how we can review the Public Procurement and Disposal Act to bring in aspect of maybe mandatory payment. Currently, the Disposal and Public Procurement and Disposal Act 2015 regulations are being done. Maybe this is an opportunity we can argue, especially during this time of discussion in the latter stages in Parliament. We can try and see how we can incorporate that. There was a suggestion that there is need also to list contracts issued to government. I think there's already a directive by His Excellency on that. Processes have started. Maybe full implementation is what is lacking. and I guess now there's a bit of drive to move towards that. There's also, as suggested, we try and do M&E on what has been paid or what needs to be paid. I think the current M&E we do, I know as a ministry, we are actually seeing or analyzing the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya policy. So we analyze in terms of procurement what is currently being bought within that framework. But like we say, yes, we can improve on that system and see exactly, besides just looking who did it, we are saying, could we have mechanisms of ensuring that everybody is on board, and maybe redress mechanisms for those who have not adhered to it. So that's another way of dealing with it. Of course, as my colleague has mentioned from Kipra, there was a national task force done on pending bills, when it was a big issue in the beginning of this financial year. So that has been done, but probably, I guess, the results of that and has already been reflected by our colleague from KRA in the panel here, where those issues were discovered of maybe not the right process and procedures done, then that can also be addressed, look for a way of addressing that. And I think the issue here is speed of implementation, then it should come in. I know as a ministry, and my colleague will talk a bit more about it, where we are signing, it has also been mentioned in the previous speaker, a code of practice. Both traders, maybe we can extend that and see how even in government that can be incorporated and implemented as a way of addressing the issue of late payments. So I think as we have all agreed, the structures are basically in place. It's an issue of implementation. I know even as a requirement now for us to get money from Treasury when we are doing the latter stages of requesting for money for payment, they insist on what is in the work plan and what are you paying, and is it actually in line with your earlier projections. Maybe I think something we can be thinking about, pending bills is not envisaged in the budgeting process. And normally the budgeting process is done well before the end of the financial year. So I think that, of course, the idea is not to have pending bills. Maybe that's why it's not anticipated. But then now that we have the reality that they're there, how can that then be reflected? Because as we put tighter measures of insisting that you're actually going to get money based on what is in your work plan, and pending bills was not originally in your work plan, then we see a prolonged delay. Whereas we say, yes, the law requires that you pay your pending bills first, but if in the next financial year, it's not in your work plan, how is it going to be paid? So probably, I see a gap in between there, and that's maybe one area we can try and fast track, or we can try and see how we can bridge the loophole, not to encourage pending bills, but in this reality, how can that be addressed? Thank you very much.
Once again, my name is Matthew Gomen from the State Department for Trade. I think there are a lot of issues that have been told by the earlier speakers on how we need to move forward in this area. I want to really thank the consultant for bringing up this issue very clearly. It is an issue that as we were dealing with the issue of the retail sector, you recall that we had a problem in the retail sector where we had supermarkets and the suppliers. When the supermarkets goes under, they are not paid their suppliers. We had really a lot of problems and came knocking to our offices. We sat down. We really, at the end of the day, we came up with a way forward after a study was done. Ismail has really alluded to what was done and what needs to be done going forward. Government was also at that time being told, you are the best, or you are the largest player in terms of consumption of some of these supplies, and you are looking at the others. What are you doing? And I think this is coming at that point that we need to have a broader conversation to include government as a procurement entity. And one thing that was said was, in terms of bringing money or having money in the economy, it is very important, because when there is a problem of money being held somewhere, the economy comes to a standstill. When we are not paying the suppliers, we miss the multiply effect in terms of generating more and more employment, and also generating wealth. And so what we envisage going forward is to bring about more sensitization. We need to sensitize, because we, at the moment, we know, and they have said that we have the laws. It's like most of the people who are dealing with government don't understand really much, especially the SMEs, and that's why they don't bring documentation. So from our ministry, we are doing a lot of sensitization in the counties, and with also the PMOs, so that they understand how to deal with government. Because government, has been also said, is a bureaucrat, and it must be dealt the way they want to be dealt. You don't deal with government like your friend. You deal with government as a bureaucrat, and you have to put all those that are required, because it is, you deal with it from that angle. There is a question that was asked from the floor on the status of the joint loan board scheme. This scheme was being implemented by the ministry before devolution, and after devolution, it was one of these functions that was supposed to be devolved, and in the process, it was given to the transition authority for some time. Before now, we added the intergovernmental technical committee led by Kareka Mutai, professor. And the current status is that they are looking at how to put a legal framework. Government also operates on that. When there is no legal framework, nothing moves. So there is a committee set up by the Council of Governors, the transitional authority, with the ministry. They are coming with a legal framework to make sure that the funds which are safe are given to the traders. So for us, I think what has been proposed, we really take it that we need to push, we need to just go ahead, especially on the issue of the code of regulation, the code of practice for the people who are dealing with government and subcontractors. Very key, because many of our SMEs have fallen in that trap and they have nowhere to run to. So it is important that that is really brought down, maybe in terms of we take that conversation into bringing a code of regulation for subcontractors, because the code that has been developed is between the suppliers and the retailers. So I think this one is also another very important proposal that we need to take forward. The other issue, I think, at some point there was a directive given by His Excellency that when it comes to government procurement, let's have things in a very transparent way. Let's bring out what needs to be done by government, and then who is doing what in government. When we have a process that is transparent, we are able to deal with the issues of corruption, and everybody knows what is happening. So as we move to that level, we have an institution that we need to be engaging very, is the Competition Authority. The Competition Authority has an office called the Buyer Power Office, dealing with fair trade. How to when you are feeling like you are being, somebody is taking advantage because he has more higher power, you can run to and really get assistance as a trader. So I think on that, the issue of automation I think is also very key, and IFMIS has really tried, but I think there is need for more. There is need for more so that payments are fast-tracked and the business people get this money, go back to production, generate more income, generate more employment, and that is the aspiration of government. Thank you very much.
My name is Arnachma Dadar. I work for a company called Very Credit Trade Sector Bureau. We're a debt collection company. Late payments are a very interesting topic for me. I like late payments. I like talking about delayed payments because it is the only forum where we can actually voice the private sector's opinions. The SME market is crippling down, and it is because of the non-payments from the government and some other private institutions as well. As much as I appreciate my panelists here have said that the procurements do not have a set directive as to what needs to be done and what does not need to be done, but if they were there, I don't think there would be anybody breaking the law. Right? That's one. Two, we talk about corruption. If the government entities or the people that we are dealing with were not corrupt or were not calling you on the side to say if you need this tender, let's do this and let's do that, I don't think people would actually want to get into the market. I think it's something that we need to appreciate. The people are suffering, the SMEs are suffering. Most importantly, we're in the process of working with Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and we are coming up with prompt payment codes for the SME market. We want to help them, but again with them, they come back and they say that if the government owes us money, what do we do with the government? Where do we go? How far do we go? So it's either you're putting yourself in the shooting range and getting shot, or you come back and you say, there's not going to be any more credit facilities and we will only be dealing with cash. But is it something that is viable? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we end, we have a gentleman. We have a gentleman with us, and I'd love to invite him to give us a word or two. He is from the Public Procurement Administrative Review Board. I hope I got that right. And since most of this discussion has been coalescing around procurement, or rather not procuring properly, I would allow him to give us a word or two. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatima. My name is Eno Kimungu. I am the Secretary of the Public Procurement Administrative Review Board. I'm supposed to sit at that panel, but then there came the issue of gender, so I had to step down to allow the law to take its effect. Now, I want to begin by saying that I've looked at the proposals. I think they are very progressive. This document was done well, and the findings were good. My proposal is if we can take it a notch higher, a little bit, and do a little bit more study, for two reasons. Number one is that there was actually almost an agreement here in the discussion that actually Kenya is not short of law. There's a lot of law, it's in place, and I've looked at the issues that have been raised here. I agree that most of them are, there's a mechanism in law that provides that they need to be addressed. So maybe we need to find a way, maybe we need to launch another study. Why, if these laws are there, why are they not working for us? Maybe that is what we need to take it to the next step, the next level of study. Why are these provisions not working for us? And there's an hypothesis I was given by one of my friends who is a legal professional. He said any law that is actually being enacted, it is made for reasonable men. Every law that the parliament makes is made for reasonable men. So it's expected that men will understand it and they will implement it. But I think the question is, maybe the men who are implementing these laws, the PFM Act and the Public Procurement Act, have been unreasonable. maybe we need to, it's just a hypothesis that needs maybe to be studied. There are two issues that I found very, very interesting, because I think these ones have not been provided with law. Is the issue of contractors being compelled to pay the subcontractors promptly. We discussed this and been involved in the making of the current law 2015 and the regulations that are about to be gazetted. And we could not find a way on how to go about this, because the money is spent at the proper Kncci, and the contractual obligation is between the public entity and the contractor. But the contract between the subcontractor and the contractor is not within the purview of the public entity. So we need to find out how we can be able to compel the contractors, maybe law, for them to pay the subcontractors properly. Maybe this will require amendment, and maybe that's why it will come in handy in the chamber to assist the National Treasury and Parliament to enact on this issue. Also, there's the proposal to have the functions of the Public Procurement Administrative Review Board to include determination of interest payable to suppliers. I think this one is a good proposal. It's a progressive one. At the moment, the board does not have such kind of responsibilities. Its role is limited to review disputes or tendering disputes. That is, from the time a tender is advertised to the time it is notified for award. That is only the area where they can be handled. Beyond that, it becomes a contractual issue, and therefore another jurisdiction is required by law to take over. I would want the chamber to explore working with a Public Procurement Regulatory Authority. I'm sure it has not been invited here in this. Oh, thank you. Is there? Mr. Noon is there. Yeah, sure. Mr. Noon is there. I would want the chamber to explore working with this authority, because it is the regulator, it's the legal regulator of the public procurement process. And you can work with them on how you can get these payments be made promptly to the suppliers. I've had a little experience with suppliers who have actually lodged their complaints to the authority, and they've actually been paid. It's because it's an issue that it's within the jurisdiction to enforce. So most public entities are actually, when the documents are right, they usually invoke the law, which requires them to pay these people within 30 days from the date of invoice. And therefore, public entities, whenever been compelled, they've always complied. So we need maybe to find a way on how we can get all those complaints and work with authority and see how they can be addressed, instead of going to the court, which will take forever. And finally, the issue of annual audit for implementation of procurement plans to determine the existence of implied contracts. It is a good proposal, but however, we've taken the view that there is no authority, there's nobody who can determine an implied contract except competent court of law. That is the only institution that maybe can determine the existence of one. And usually any accounting officer or public officer, when there's a contract that is implied, that one they will avoid addressing it, unless another authority compels them to pay. So we need to find a way on how this one can be addressed, and therefore within the law, and then be able to move forward. Otherwise, that is all that I wanted to implement. Thank you so much. I think it's a good initiative. Maybe Mr. Mungu have something to add? Okay.
Thank you very much, Enoch. Maybe mine is to add on the proposed amendments. I've also looked at them. Being a member of the task force which developed the Act 2015 and drafting of the new regulations, what I would say is that although we were told robbing is a marathon, not sprint, as we speak now, the law is being amended. If you check the miscellaneous bill number 2 of 2018, the Procurement Act is being amended, and that's where Honorable Moses Kuria was also voicing his views on what should be done. if we could sprint and maybe see how we can engage Parliament and National Treasury, and then we see what is that low-hanging fruit which can be incorporated. Because once those amendments are gone through, it may take a while before we are able to lobby and push for additional amendments, because those amendments are the one, in my view, holding the issuance of regulations. The moment those amendments are made, new regulations will be issued, and once they are issued, it may take some time as we lobby to have the amendments done. Then the other issue is on the records. I would still urge that as bidders, as suppliers, really ensure that at least you have a document showing that you are engaged. And this will assist you in two ways. When it comes to payment, if you don't have an LSO, you don't have a bid which you submitted, no document is existing, and then you have only the invoice, when it comes to determination of what to be paid, you cannot be paid by your invoice. Somebody has to determine what we call quantum merit, and they look at what you supplied vis-a-vis what is existing in the market. You may not be paid full amount. The other one is dispute resolution. If you don't have any document and a dispute has arisen on payment, how will the dispute be sorted out when you don't have a legal document or a contract showing on how parties, in case you fail to perform, how it will be engaged? And maybe, as Mr. Kirungu said, there is a need for us as a team to see how we can engage each other. For example, now we have MOU with the Competition Authority. Then we see how as Chamber and PPRI and any other relevant stakeholders we can work together to ensure that the vision of the 30%, for example, by Kenya Build Kenya are realized within the procurement law. Thank you very much.
Very quickly, I just want to say that there's an important voice missing in this conversation, and that is the controller of budget. According to the Constitution, she has the right to stop or rather approve budgets. And if we can craft a law around about ensuring that pending bills are paid before any withdrawal from either the consolidated account or the CRF, then we can approach her and see how we can work with her. CRA also is in the room. You can lobby with James. He has the authority to call all suppliers and have a list or a compendium of when they were supplied, the goods were supplied, what date, and how much is owing. And I'm sure he's already working on the county fiscal strategy, on the ceilings, right? And he used the ceilings to bring some order in the county government, because now he sets a schedule where it explains exactly how much money needs to go to the county assembly in terms of salaries. So you can also lobby him and ask him to have a list of all the counties that are owing and see how it can affect in terms of the equitable allocation that goes to them. And finally, that miscellaneous bill, I think the advocacy arm of KNCI is sleeping. They should actually be lobbying right now in Parliament, especially because this bill has incorporated the areas of issues of payment and deadlines and all that. So you really need to get involved with the committee that is reviewing that particular area of the Procurement Act and push for it to be passed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Mine is just to say that SMEs, they need space in representing the small business communities. Because when we talk of this big procurement with the government, mostly they go to the big people, you know, who are owning big businesses. But the small business SME is the one who is contributing a lot to the economy. Can we be represented in most of these government organizations so that we can lobby for the small people? Thank you.
Thank you. And I would return and say, could you kindly join the chamber? No, the others as well, so that we can have a committee that will look after specifically the MSMEs, the small people. And one of the things that we are discussing here is that the people that, those bigger people get contracts, but they don't do the work. The work is done by you. Now, when they get paid, they don't pay you. One of the recommendations, I don't know if it's going to work, I do a lot of work for IFC and the World Bank. Now, immediately I put in my bid, I have to say and write who are the other people that will get that job done with me. It is not me that will get the entire contract. So the minute I put their details and their names and blah, 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 and of course their, what are their, the professional acumen that they have, if once I'm paid and I do not pay, they have a right to say I was part of this contract. Because it was written. It was there in black and white. So they knew, World Bank knew, IFC knew that it's not Fatma that's doing the job, it's Fatma plus Chao plus Sheila plus blah, 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 blah. And then if Fatma doesn't pay Sheila, Sheila has a recourse to say, I did this job and I was not paid. That was just a proposal, if something that can be done. We're about to go for lunch. Allow me, just 5 minutes, and I hope I will not outstay my welcome here, 5 minutes, just to recap, because we've spoken a lot of things this morning. I will not be able to take everything through because of time, but one of the things that clearly came out, and I appreciate Madam Sheila, is that as a BMO, we need to cooperate with other BMOs and then petition or talk to the government and say, you have this law, but this law has not been implemented. It doesn't become just one person. If it affects the MSMEs, then we get the right people. If it affects the manufacturers or the suppliers or whoever, but we go together, and our sole mandate at that particular point in time is to get implementation of a certain law or a certain policy or whatever it is that the government had said would be done, and it was not done. Having said that, it is also about us working with the trade department, because it sounds nice what you're saying, and I have no reason to doubt you, it is the right thing. Work with Chamber, because we are in 47 counties. We have the county chairs who are represented here today. They work with the business people, so we can sensitize them. Most of these issues that have come here today is because of people are not aware. People don't know. I mean, I'll tell you something, I know I have 5 minutes, who actually came, I have some friends in the banking world, who came to ask for 5 million, wanted a loan of 5 million, and was very, very open about it. Out of this 5 million, 3 million will be to do the job, and 2 million will be for me to get the contract. And we said, no, don't go. You will not only lose 2, you will lose 5. Because again, you probably don't have the paperwork. This is just somebody who is trying to get money from you. Now, why did that person come? Because they're desperate. So we need to work together. Please open the doors for us when we come. Don't shut your doors, because at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's not about you. It's about this country. It's about our future. If we are killing the geese that are giving us the golden eggs, there will be nothing. When it comes to multiple licenses, why should a foreign, and we have no issue, we have to work with them because we are global. We've signed with them. But how come something that came from so far becomes cheaper than something that just came from Naivasha? I mean, I know I failed maths, but that beats mathematics. Isn't it? So something somewhere is not right. And this is what we are saying for the sake, I went to the multi-agency corruption, blah, 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 and I loved what the AG said. You and I have reached 6 o'clock. We are only waiting for God to take us. But what happens to our children and our grandchildren? My 5 minutes are up. Lunch, ladies and gentlemen, is on the ground floor, Baraka Restaurants. I just want to say thank you. I don't even know if my thank you is enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There has been a world of contribution and something that we can work with. Allow me, and I'm giving him 2 minutes, to invite our acting CEO, Wana George Kiondo, to give us a vote of thanks and to thank us because we have picked your brain, and that's the most important thing any human being can take. Asante.
Thank you, Fatma, for the nice presentations and for all the good things that you've done, for being a nice MC. I think I've not seen that aspect of you. I don't want to stand between you and your lunch. I want to really thank you for your presence here. I want to thank God for giving us this day. Even as we planned for this day, we didn't know that it would turn out to be the way it has been. It's been wonderful. We want to thank the PS, Ms. Betty Maina, for her presence, our national chairman, Mr. Kiprono Kitoni, and his vice, Mr. James Mureu. We had our directors from the chamber. We had Director James Mureu, we had Catherine Sitato, we had Director Omar Sadiq, and of course our panelists. I want to recognize the presence of all our panelists, Mrs. Sheila Yeke, Mr. Stephen Odua, Mr. Matthew Komen, Mr. Muledi Mutuku, Henok, of course, with a wonderful contribution, Mr. James Katule, whom I worked with before, Ms. Nadma Dadar, thank you very, very much, and of course, Mr. Ismail Bet, thank you for the wonderful contributions. I would also like to recognize the former commissioner of NACADA, Mr. Joseph Kabudi, who was here, but he's left. The SIPE consultant, SIPE team led by Mr. Ben Kirago, our consultant, Mr. Kirago Ashira, for the nice insight that we've had this morning. Thank you very much for the healthy contributions from the floor. We've taken in your contributions very, very positively, and we hope that it will continue, we'll keep up the tempo, and this will continue to go on. Of course, I want you to appreciate the chamber. What you've seen here today has taken a lot of planning. A lot of midnight oil has been burned. Of course, Chow and her team, thank you very much. I can remember speaking to them last night. They were still doing what is called a dry run inside this very hall, planning to ensure that things go very well. So with those few and many remarks, I also want to thank the chairman from the counties, Mr. Wario, all the way from Lamu, Tana River, yes. Thank you very much for your contributions. And by those few many remarks, I want to say thank you all for coming. These sessions will continue. We'll continue engaging you. We also want to invite the people or the business community who are not our members. Please join our platform so that you can build this country together. The challenges are many. We want to hear them from you. If you tell it to us, we shall be able to capture them and make issues out of them so that we can approach the right government agency to discuss these issues and, of course, look for a way forward. So I don't want to stand between you and lunch. I want to call my sister Chow to come and pray for lunch. So Chow, please come over. Short prayer,
Okay, thank you very much. Let us pray. Let's start. Okay. Everlasting Father, I want to thank you for this day. Thank you for the session that we have had. Before us is a meal, even as we go to take it, we pray that you bless it. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.